Kang Do-hyun, our protagonist, had just returned from military service. His family had been waiting for him all this time, finally wanting to be there. But this guy had other priorities. He barely glanced at them and simply ran past, because in his room was a new VR capsule, which he had saved up for during his time in the army. Before leaving for military service, the protagonist was the best hardcore player in the incredibly difficult game Demrock. It was legendary, but due to a decline in popularity, the servers had to be shut down. Upon returning home, Kang Do-hyun learned about the release of a new game, GOTS, a sequel to his favorite game. Its popularity had skyrocketed, all because it had a ton of updated content. The MC decided he would punish the top players in the new virtual reality. When he logged into the game, the system demanded he create a new character. Without hesitation, Kang Do-hyun took his old nickname. The protagonist was amazed by the VR graphics of GOTS. But to begin his new journey, he needed to choose a weapon. To gain confidence, the boy grabbed the sword he'd long since grown accustomed to. The gamer was about to take down the monsters when he suddenly heard an unfamiliar voice on the server. A knight captain rushes over and treats him as a mercenary who has arrived in the middle of a crisis. The man, Charlie, demands to know why Do-hyun is standing there instead of helping. Without waiting for an answer, Charlie grabs him and drags him into the battle. Charlie explains that the other mercenaries are already fighting and automatically forms a party with him. Together they race deeper into the burning castle. Do-hyun notices Charlie suddenly react to something ahead. They find the aftermath of slaughter, with dead soldiers and monsters strewn across the hall. Charlie realizes the enemy has already allied itself with monsters and suspects a pact with a far worse being. He warns that if they do not stop the ritual quickly, a catastrophic monster will descend. Charlie urges Do-hyun onward, insisting the summoner lies just ahead. Do-hyun follows, but stays alert rather than blindly trusting the scripted rush. His caution is rewarded when a hidden projectile suddenly flies toward them. Several spears slam down around Charlie, nearly pinning him in place. At the same time, a pack of beast-like monsters emerges from the darkness to cut off their path. Charlie prepares to break through the swarm himself. Instead, Do-hyun moves first and charges straight at the monsters. One of the beasts lunges to intercept him. Do-hyun's focus sharpens instantly, his old combat instincts returning in full. Charlie realizes too late that Do-hyun has entered real danger. Do-hyun plants his foot and slips past the incoming strike with precise timing. The monster's attack misses completely as he passes through its blind spot. The beast is caught off guard by how cleanly he evades it. Do-hyun tightens his grip and commits to the counter. With one decisive slash, he cuts the first monster down. His expression hardens as the thrill of battle settles over him. He follows through in a blur, carving through the rest of the pack before they can react. The surviving monsters can only scream in panic. One tries a desperate overhead strike to crush him. Do-hyun calmly sidesteps the blow, letting it crash harmlessly beside him. He answers with a brutal close-range punch. The impact caves the monster in and finishes it instantly. The last beast dies, still trying to understand what hit it. The remaining enemies hesitate, shocked by the massacre. Their confidence collapses into fear as they realize this newcomer is far beyond them. Do-hyun's eyes sharpen again as he prepares one final sweep. He unleashes a wide sword arc that wipes out the rest in a single motion. When the strike ends, he comes to a controlled stop without wasting movement. The corridor falls silent around the bodies of the monsters he just erased. He lowers the sword as if the fight barely counted as a warm-up. Do-hyun is pleased to find that, despite 2 years away, his edge has not dulled much at all. He even feels lighter and more responsive than he expected inside this new game. Charlie is left stunned that one unknown mercenary handled 5 monsters alone. The system records Charlie's admiration and raises his favorability toward Do-hyun. Do-hyun notes that favorability existed in Demrock too, but this game seems far more generous with it. Charlie convinces himself that only a legendary hero could display such power in the tutorial. His trust surges to the maximum, to the point that he would believe in Do-hyun no matter what others accused him of. Do-hyun receives a rare title for maxing an NPC's affection during the tutorial, gaining faster affection growth and a boost to all stats. Charlie happily declares that the situation has become much easier thanks to Do-hyun's arrival. He says that if they defeat the Dark Sorcerer beyond the next chamber, the war can still end in victory. Before they can advance, violent purple energy erupts from the sealed room, signaling that the summoning has already begun. The corruption intensifies behind the door. Something monstrous starts forcing its way through the breach. Charlie resolves to hold the creatures outside and orders Do-hyun to go stop the summoner alone. Trusting him completely, Charlie empowers himself and entrusts the decisive role to Do-hyun. He even blesses Do-hyun as the hero who must save Arlen Castle. Then Charlie charges into the corrupted chamber himself to buy time. Do-hyun is baffled that Charlie went in first instead of following the expected script. Remembering the walkthroughs, he realizes the tutorial has already diverged from the standard route. He concludes that GOS changes far more dramatically in response to player actions than he expected. With the path now altered, he steps up to the sealed door alone. He faces the barrier as purple lightning crawls across it. A hidden prompt appears, warning that only one person may enter and that death inside will remove the boss's restraints. Do-hyun immediately recognizes this as a hidden piece, a deliberately concealed event with special rewards. He recalls that hidden pieces are secret mechanisms triggered only under specific conditions and often grant exceptional benefits. Seeing the value of the opportunity, he accepts the risk without hesitation. The barrier opens and admits him alone. Inside, the summoner loses control and screams in terror as the thing he called refuses to obey. The creature's maw opens, making clear that the summoner is about to be devoured by his own ritual. Dohyun watches in shock as the scale of the hidden encounter reveals itself. Blood and darkness spill as the summoning turns into a feeding frenzy. What emerges is not a mere tutorial boss but a chained demonic dragon. The system identifies it as the restrained iron-blooded demonic dragon, a legendary named boss whose power is only limited because it remains sealed. Dohyun is stunned that a legendary great enemy exists in the tutorial at all. He realizes GOS inherited more than surface ideas from Demrock. Like Demrock, it uses a rarity hierarchy that climbs from normal to rare to heroic to legendary. That shared tier system confirms that the new game may hide the same kind of absurd, game-breaking opportunities Kaiser once mastered. The story explains that boss monsters are ranked 2, and the most exceptional among them are those important enough to bear names. One such named boss is introduced as the bound iron-blooded demonic dragon species, a chained legendary creature. The protagonist realizes he is facing exactly that kind of named boss at the very start. Even with its power sealed, the dragon radiates a terrifying presence that makes the encounter feel unfair. The bound dragon unleashes a roar as if to crush his will before the fight even begins. Its overwhelming pressure bears down on him, turning the opening moment into a test of survival. System warnings reveal the roar is a debuff that sharply reduces his movement, attack speed, defense, and magic resistance. He braces himself and forces his body to move despite the suppression. Anger breaks through his fear as he curses the people who designed such a merciless tutorial. He tries to reassure himself that the dragon's sealed state at least leaves him a slim chance. Even so, he knows one hit from its massive claws would kill him instantly. That danger reminds him of the brutal life-or-death situations he endured back in Demlock. From those memories he draws a simple lesson: hesitation never saved him. He accepts that this fight is another do-or-die moment and commits fully. His focus sharpens as he reads the dragon's movements for an opening. The dragon strikes first, smashing the ground with a sweeping attack meant to end things immediately. He narrowly escapes by planting his feet and slipping out at the last instant. Using the opening, he counters with a fast slash across the attacking limb. The dragon roars back in irritation rather than pain, showing how little damage he dealt. He keeps moving and chains another attack instead of backing off. For a moment he senses something strange about the exchange and looks back in surprise. His blue-edged strikes continue to carve shallow damage into the boss while he stays just outside its kill range. He rides the momentum of his evasive footwork, turning survival into a rhythm of repeated chip attacks. His concentration hardens as he measures the fight more analytically. The result is sobering. 2 attacks only shaved off 120 health from a boss with nearly a million HP. He recognizes the truth from player discussions that this tutorial boss was infamous for being the worst possible difficulty. Past players had insisted the tutorial boss was never meant to be beaten, only damaged for realism. Others remembered the dragon as a nightmare so unsettling they did not even want to talk about it. Some had wondered whether it might be beatable since it technically took damage, but the consensus was still no. Even those who managed to land hits had still died, which makes his continued resistance extraordinary. Then the impossible happens. The boss's displayed name changes to demonic dragon species of sloth, shocking the wider player community. Online spectators erupt in disbelief, realizing someone has just done what even top players could not. In the fight itself, he drives a decisive strike deep into the dragon's body. The dragon lets out a final cry as the accumulated damage finally overwhelms it. Its enormous chain form collapses, and the impossible tutorial victory becomes real. The system confirms he has defeated the bound iron-blooded demonic dragon species, becoming the first person to solo a legendary named boss in the tutorial and earning a place in the Book of Adventure. Exhausted and battered, he leans on his sword and can barely process what he just accomplished. He insults the dead boss anyway, venting the stress of the fight after surviving by the thinnest margin. A final stab into the corpse confirms to him that the monster is truly finished. That certainty leads him to a bigger realization. If even the strongest players failed here, then he has crossed a line no one else could. He bitterly imagines mocking the game's creators for making a boss that looked unbeatable in the first place. But his mood shifts as he wonders how the other players from his past are doing now. The system awards him the title First Slayer, and announces that achievement-based traits are being unlocked. A flood of traits opens at once, including Weapon Master, Hidden Dragon, Slayer, Hero, and Overcome. Another condition is met, hinting that an even rarer reward is coming. He is told a unique trait called Eye of Truth will also be unlocked, leaving him stunned by how many rewards he is receiving. His shock deepens because the tutorial normally grants only a single trait. The story explains that traits are one of the game's most important systems. They range from exploration and combat specialties to higher-tier rewards tied to the scale of a player's achievements. Reviewing the effects, he sees absurd bonuses like universal weapon mastery, stat increases, tracking, and status immunity. Then his attention fixes on the one reward that matters most. Eye of Truth is revealed as a unique trait whose power is to perceive what is hidden. He understands that while the other traits are excellent, they are not truly singular. Many elite players might possess one of those strong traits, even if not all of them together. But Eye of Truth is different, because it is literally one of a kind in the entire world. He realizes he has hit a jackpot beyond anything he imagined, a unique trait plus 5 other major rewards. On top of that, the First Slayer title itself grants powerful boss-killing bonuses and permanent stat increases. For someone who always thought of himself as cursed by bad luck, the windfall feels almost unreal. His attention is drawn to movement behind him before he can savor it for long. A battered knight in white armor emerges from the ruined hall, having survived the battle's aftermath. The knight struggles to understand what he is seeing, as if trying to reconcile the impossible with reality. He staggers forward, still shaken by the dragon's death. The protagonist turns to face this unexpected witness. The knight asks whether he truly slew the monster whose roar he heard. What astonishes the knight even more is that the victor stands there without a single visible wound from the fight. When he asks who the protagonist really is, the protagonist dismisses the question as unimportant. The knight instead declares that heroes are born in times of chaos. He insists the protagonist's arrival in this turbulent world will become a light that changes everything. Introducing himself as Charlie, he swears that conviction with absolute certainty. Then Charlie kneels and addresses him as a hero, asking for the chance to serve him. A system prompt explains that Charlie, the Knight Commander of Arlen Castle, wishes to pledge loyalty and become his subordinate. The offer is so unexpected that the protagonist can only stare at it in disbelief. The system adds a catch. Charlie is long dead, and accepting his loyalty will not grant the normal benefits because this tutorial is only a recreation of the past. Realizing the pledge is mostly symbolic, the protagonist decides to accept it anyway. The system records that Charlie's tragic war now ends in victory within his memories, allowing the dead knight to rest peacefully while remembering the protagonist as his liege. The protagonist reflects on that promise of peaceful rest with a trace of melancholy. A warp to the Pantheon begins, pulling both of them into blue light. They are drawn toward the portal together as the tutorial scene dissolves. Charlie addresses him one last time as his liege. Still devoted, Charlie asks where they should go next. The question makes the protagonist pause and think beyond mere survival. He answers that they should go wherever they are needed. He frames that choice as the only proper response to a world ruled by chaos. Charlie repeats the words with reverence, as if hearing the creed of the hero he had hoped for. The system resumes control, announcing the final countdown to the Pantheon. Before disappearing, Charlie offers him a keepsake and begs him to accept it. The protagonist takes the object while the warp countdown continues. Charlie thanks him, entrusting him with a final plea for salvation as his body begins to fade. The transfer completes, and the scene shifts fully to the Pantheon. There the system explains that this is the place where players choose a god and determine their future path. He stands before the towering structure as the game formally prays for divine blessings to fall on him. He recognizes the Pantheon by reputation and sizes it up with cautious curiosity. The narration undercuts its grandeur by noting that players more commonly call it the Gacha Room, the place that makes or breaks them. This is where the god gacha happens, and the single god a player serves determines their class path. The gods themselves are tiered into fable gods, hero gods, and the far superior myth gods. Fable gods are beings elevated by stories and legends spread among people. Hero gods are former human heroes who ascended after death. Myth gods are the highest order, creators of entire mythologies such as Zeus or Odin. Each card in the Pantheon contains one god, and he is told to choose which one he will serve. Knowing his terrible luck, he tries not to get greedy and prepares to settle for whatever comes. Then he notices one card glowing gold among the others and immediately senses something special. Eye of Truth activates on its own, proving it can expose hidden information. He is stunned by how absurdly powerful that ability is. He realizes that if it works consistently, every future gacha pull can be manipulated toward the best result. Old memories of people mocking his terrible luck come back to him. What he once laughed off now resurfaces as years of bitterness. But with Eye of Truth in hand, he sees a path back to becoming a top-ranked player. He forces himself to calm down so he does not ruin this chance through excitement. Then he decisively reaches only for the gold card, refusing to waste the advantage. He draws it and waits for the result with rising anticipation. The card reveals the myth god one-armed sword god Tyr and asks whether he will choose him. He is ecstatic, convinced that a myth god will completely change his future. That hope is crushed when the system declares that the vessel of the apostle has not been formed, meaning he cannot become Tyr's apostle and must draw again. Even Tyr is bewildered, and the protagonist is left reeling at the revelation that he lacks the vessel needed to serve a god. He realizes this is something he has never heard of before, which makes the situation even more alarming. Then a thought hits him. The missing vessel may be tied to something that should have happened in the tutorial. Normally, players who die to the demon lord's spawn receive a goddess's revelation, but because he killed the spawn instead, that revelation never occurred. He suspects that by surviving and winning, he may have accidentally skipped the event that forms an apostle's vessel. Checking his status confirms the problem, because nothing in his class or titles reflects any divine revelation. Where apostle should have appeared, he is still listed only as an ordinary adventurer. That leaves him furious and lost, unsure what he is supposed to do now. If every god card will reject him for lacking a vessel, then the entire pantheon becomes meaningless. The weight of that possibility nearly breaks him as he collapses in despair. He considers deleting the character and starting over, but the 60-day penalty makes that option unbearable. Just as he spirals, something unexpected catches his eye. A red card appears, a color tier he has never even heard of. Drawn by pure curiosity, he reaches for the unknown card. The system reveals it as a hidden card tied not to a god but to the forgotten last adventurer Cassiyar, and because he already possesses an adventurer's vessel, he becomes Cassiyar's apostle. He instantly understands that this is not a failure at all but a hidden piece no one else knows about. His class advances to last adventurer, and the description reveals that humanity was once a race of mighty adventurers before its fall, with him now inheriting the final remnant of that legacy. Its unique class ability is even more shocking. He can use skills regardless of class restrictions. That means he is no longer bound by the normal limits that force players into narrow roles. He realizes he can cherry-pick the best skills from every path and build a custom skill tree. Combined with Eye of Truth and Weapon Master, the class opens a route to optimize everything he learns. For the first time, he sees a future where he can become an all-master with no obvious weakness. Class advancement completes, and the system prepares to send him into Avardo proper. As the countdown resumes, he decides this bizarre outcome is worth embracing rather than regretting. He quietly vows to climb back up and become a ranker again. He arrives in Avardo, specifically Arde, the city of beginnings where new players start their journeys. Around him, other newcomers lament bad gacha results and try to console one another about non-combat classes. He sees the familiar despair of failed starts and recognizes how close he came to looking just as ruined. Nearby, guild scouts complain that there is no one worth recruiting today. The narration explains that these scouts are guild recruiters, though players usually treat them like annoying street hawkers. One scout worries about missing his monthly quota and getting chewed out by his manager. Then another scout notices the protagonist standing apart from the crowd. At first they dismiss him as a hopeless wreck whose mind must have snapped from a bad pull. They decide he is not worth recruiting and start to walk away. Meanwhile, the protagonist checks Charlie's gift and discovers it is a hero tier item, the Necklace of Blood and Covenant, with powerful scaling defense and magic resistance effects. The reward is so valuable that he can only savor it with delighted disbelief. Before he can indulge further, a new quest appears in front of him, Goblin Cleanup, signaling the true beginning of his new path. He accepts Dante's Goblin Extermination quest, pleased that the mission appears instantly, and gives him a full day to kill 40 goblins. Dante turns the hunt into a public call to arms, urging every nearby beginner to wipe out the goblins for him. The square erupts into recruitment as new players scramble to form parties and rush their leveling plans. Seeing everyone group up, he realizes solo hunting will put him at a disadvantage. A tank approaches him with an archer and a mage, inviting him to join their grind to level 12. They pitch the practical benefits of teaming up, especially the party bonus and safer hunting. He considers it, and admits to himself that they have a point. After weighing the easier fights and bonus experience, he decides party play is almost mandatory. He agrees, and a 4-man party is officially formed under Shieldbest's lead. The tank notices his name and assumes he must be a fan of the famous Kaiser. The archer explains that Kaiser was once Demrock's top-ranked player, so using that name sounds like devoted admiration. He awkwardly lets the misunderstanding pass instead of correcting them. The new party rallies around their leveling goal and heads out full of confidence. He joins their enthusiasm, though more out of convenience than shared excitement. Once the hunt begins, Shieldbest opens by stunning a goblin with a shield bash and creates the first opening. Proud of landing the control skill, Shieldbest orders the whole party to attack at once. The archer and mage immediately follow up with ranged attacks while the tank holds the target in place. Their coordination works, and the first goblin goes down cleanly. The kill draws the attention of more goblins, and the quiet skirmish starts turning into a mob fight. Several goblins rush them together, forcing the party to brace for a larger clash. One goblin crashes into Shieldbest, showing that the tank is now being pressured from multiple sides. The backline panics and calls for Shieldbest as the formation begins to strain. Shieldbest desperately tells the others to grab the enemy on him before he gets overwhelmed. The archer hesitates because his key skill is still on cooldown, leaving the tank exposed. Before the party can recover, a goblin leaps in from above and turns the situation into a real emergency. Shieldbest realizes too late that another attack is coming straight at him. The goblin bears down with a vicious grin, ready to break through the party's defense. A projectile flashes past instead of hitting Shieldbest, signaling that someone else has intervened. He cuts down one goblin in a blur, instantly reducing the pressure on the tank. Shieldbest looks up in shock, realizing the rescue came from the quiet swordsman he barely understood. The archer and mage are just as stunned that he moved so fast and decisively. Without waiting for praise, he charges straight into the remaining goblins to seize control of the fight. His attack lands with enough force to disrupt the enemy advance and open space for the party. He chains the momentum into more kills, dropping goblins one after another before they can regroup. The archer and mage start openly cheering him, suddenly treating him as the party's star. He calmly switches grip and prepares to keep fighting rather than bask in their praise. Shielbest acknowledges his skill and realizes their pace would be impossible without him. Just as Shielbest starts to say they will clear the quest easily, he notices something wrong. He warns Kaiser that enemies are behind him, but the warning comes a moment too late. A much larger goblin pack emerges from the forest, revealing that the battle is far from over. The sheer number of red-eyed goblins makes it obvious the party has wandered into a deadly swarm. Shielbest immediately judges the fight unwinnable and decides they should retreat while they still can. Instead of running with them, Kaiser launches himself toward the oncoming horde. The goblins surge to meet him, expecting to overwhelm a lone swordsman. He leaps above the mob, turning their charge into an opening rather than a threat. As he descends, his killing intent sharpens and his eyes flare with a dangerous focus. For a brief instant the forest falls still, as if the battlefield is holding its breath. Then his strike detonates through the pack with explosive force. A memory surfaces of someone mocking his habit of picking reckless fights, framing this moment as part of a larger pattern. He had once been challenged on what reckless even meant, still unwilling to see caution as wisdom. The criticism had been simple: charging in while weakened against a boss-level threat was obviously reckless. His answer had been just as simple: if he wins anyway, the risk feels justified. Even his companion could only concede that point while still insisting it was dangerous. Back in the present, he lands a critical blow, kills another goblin, and even secures a pelt through contribution rewards. He quickly identifies the remaining poison dart goblin as the most urgent threat in the group. He accelerates again, using footwork to close the distance before the ranged enemies can keep firing. He reminds himself of the basic rule of fighting multiple enemies: eliminate the ranged attackers first. He tears through the front line while driving straight toward the backline goblins. One dart goblin tries to fire, but it is already too late. He cuts down enemies on both sides in the same motion, preventing the ranged attack from turning the battle. In the middle of the slaughter, a new trait called Overcome awakens, empowering him to push past his limits through sheer will. With that trait active, he meets another attack head-on instead of yielding ground. The last dart goblin panics as it realizes the hunter charging it is only getting stronger. He slices it down in a blur, continuing to move as if the battlefield itself is slowing for him. His steps stay light and controlled, showing that he has fully seized the rhythm of the fight. He pivots toward the final melee goblin before it can exploit his momentum. The goblin tries to counter with its own blade, but he intercepts the attack cleanly. He follows through with ruthless precision, turning defense into a killing stroke. The enemy's weapon flies free as his slash opens its throat. System messages reveal why he can fight this way. Weapon Master removes equipment restrictions, and his Adventurer class lets him use even basic dagger skills. Testing that freedom, he snatches up a dagger in the middle of combat. He drives the dagger into a goblin's weak point and triggers exploit weakness for another critical hit. Even while stabbing one enemy, he keeps another at bay with his sword, fighting like a one-man party. A heavy impact follows as he shifts again, refusing to stay bound to a single weapon style. More system notices explain that the same unrestricted mastery applies to blunt weapons as well. He immediately puts that to use, diving in with a club-like weapon as naturally as if he had trained with it for years. The goblin facing him can only stare in disbelief at how quickly he adapts. He crushes its face with the blunt weapon, proving he can kill efficiently no matter what he picks up. Without pausing, he finishes another goblin at close range with brutal economy. The last enemy's head bursts apart under his swing skill, ending the entire pack. After the massacre, his weapon proficiencies and masteries rise across swords, daggers, and blunt weapons, and he is delighted by how profitable the fight was. He realizes Weapon Master is far better than he first assumed, because it grants immediate practical use rather than just future learning potential. That discovery leaves him genuinely thrilled, almost giddy at how overpowered the combination feels. From behind his shield, Shielbest can only stare at the field of corpses Kaiser created alone. Trying to make sense of it, Shielbest wonders whether what he just saw is even possible. He compares Kaiser's feat to what even veteran parties must endure just to handle a goblin pack and realizes the gap is absurd. The thought that this man fought the entire swarm by himself feels almost impossible to accept. The name Kaiser starts to weigh on Shielbest differently now, no longer as a joke or fan tribute. He begins to wonder if this could somehow be the same legendary Kaiser from the Demrock era. He immediately talks himself out of it, deciding that idea is too ridiculous to believe. After all, the Real Kaiser was a vanished genius ranker, and it makes no sense that such a figure would randomly end up in his beginner party. Still, he cannot shake the question of who this man really is. Kaiser, meanwhile, is privately delighted that his hidden identity is causing exactly the kind of confusion he enjoys. Shielbest's final conclusion is simpler and safer. Whatever else he is, this guy is definitely a little insane. Kaiser suddenly notices something else as the battlefield settles and the temporary weapons begin to react. The borrowed weapons vanish in blue light, confirming that anything not dropped as loot disappears after the fight. Satisfied that he has tested both the weapon restrictions and the skill-sharing effects, he decides that is enough experimentation for now. He opens his status window and sees that the goblin hunt has pushed him all the way to level 4, with 2 stat points left to assign. Even with unrestricted weapons, he decides his true foundation is still the sword and plans his growth around that. He also notes that his titles and Charlie's necklace are covering his weaker stats for the moment, giving him room to specialize. The others break his thoughts by praising him as if they have just witnessed something legendary. The whole party showers him with admiration, openly declaring that Kaiser carried them. Shielbest half-jokes that at this level of skill, he might as well be the real Kaiser. The archer agrees that the way he fights makes that comparison feel strangely natural. They keep insisting his performance was so incredible that they would believe almost any rumor about him. He smiles awkwardly, amused by the irony that they are accidentally telling the truth. The archer presses him for an explanation, wondering if he pulled some absurdly rare trait or mythic advantage because his damage makes no sense. Kaiser downplays it by crediting his traits and a lucky title rather than exposing anything deeper. That answer only impresses them more, and they start imagining him becoming a future ranker. The party's mood turns celebratory as they gather around him with renewed confidence. Once their stamina recovers, Shielbest proposes continuing the hunt instead of stopping there. Emboldened by Kaiser's presence, the archer even suggests taking on 10 goblins at once next time. Kaiser agrees easily, amused by how fearless they have become after being carried. The others rally behind Shielbest again, now convinced that with Kaiser beside them they can handle anything. Their enthusiasm triggers a memory of someone once urging him to hurry, pulling his thoughts toward another group entirely. In that memory, a different party bickers about loot and status while arrogantly assuming Kaiser will handle everything for them. Back in the present, he wonders what the rest of the players are doing elsewhere in the game. A new urgent quest appears, asking for the blood of a mutant goblin warrior hidden in the caves of the Arde forest. He immediately recognizes the target as the notorious mutant goblin boss. The party soon arrives at the mouth of the cave where that boss resides. The others admit they are nervous, and he reassures them that fear is natural before a dangerous fight. He reflects that the extra hunting on the way here at least raised the whole party to level 9. Even so, he knows this dungeon's reputation as the newbie slayer is well earned. He recalls how players online describe the place as a dungeon where first attempts are practically death sentences. Its formal name may be Arde's Tomb, but every nickname attached to it sounds like a warning. Compared to ordinary goblin mobs, the mutant goblin warrior's dungeon is on a completely different level of difficulty. Worse, success depends on exact teamwork patterns, so inexperience becomes lethal. That combination is what turned the dungeon into a graveyard for beginners. He remembers other players complaining that the place feels impossible, and that party mistakes make it more frustrating than solo play. Even the timid mage can tell from the stories alone that this dungeon must be brutal. Shielbest steals everyone's resolve by insisting they must clear it anyway if they want to keep up with future raids. Kaiser agrees with that logic, recognizing that this checkpoint cannot be avoided forever. He compares it to real life, where people always prefer proven experience over rookies, and sees the same rule at work here. He also remembers that unlike ordinary content, this clear cannot be faked or bypassed through lies. Because every achievement is recorded, cheating your way past this gate is impossible. That record is kept in the Book of Adventures, the system that tracks a player's entire history. From quests and materials to new regions and boss kills, every meaningful accomplishment is written there. In other words, everything a player does in the game becomes part of a permanent record. So if they want access to serious raid opportunities in the next city, they have no choice but to clear this boss honestly. And unlike Arde itself, the next city's boss progression is mandatory, making this hurdle even more important. With that settled, he steps forward toward the sealed entrance. The party reaches the dungeon gate and confirms the rules, a rare single-boss party dungeon for 4 players under level 10. Kaiser calmly asks if they are ready to go in. The others answer with nervous determination, promising they have studied the strategy and will do their best not to fail. He pauses, letting the weight of the moment settle over the group. Their silence breaks as they realize he is waiting for their final commitment. They move into position before the gate, each taking their role for the coming boss fight. Shielbest initiates entry, and the system asks the party to approve entering the mutant goblin warrior's habitat. The archer answers first with a forceful yes, choosing courage over hesitation. The mage follows with the same resolve, and the party commits itself to the dungeon. The swordsman accepts the challenge with quiet confidence. The system confirms a 4-player entry and sends the party into the variant goblin warrior's habitat. The team steps through the massive gate into the boss chamber. He treats the raid like a long-awaited spar and prepares to test himself. Inside the cavern, the party advances cautiously into the arena. They move in formation, aware that the fight has already begun. Torchlight reveals the battlefield as they press deeper in. The boss appears, and the system identifies it as an elite goblin warped by a curse that stole both its color and sanity. The goblin answers their arrival with an immediate, feral charge. Its opening rush makes clear that this is no ordinary enemy. The party is shaken by the pressure, and even the tank starts doubting whether this still feels like a mere game. The swordsman snaps them out of it, and warns that the attack is already upon them. The goblin barrels straight toward the front line. The tank realizes that no matter how strong Cassiar is, one man cannot protect all 3 allies at once. He understands that the others will die if he leaves everything to the swordsman. So he resolves to fulfill his own role and meet the boss head-on. The goblin commits fully to the collision. The tank orders everyone to spread out before the charge can wipe them together. The party scatters, leaving the tank alone to receive the boss. Reading the encounter, He identifies the first pattern as a straight charge. He braces and takes the impact with his shield instead of letting it break the back line. The block briefly stuns the boss, and he immediately calls for the others to capitalize. The archer and mage launch their attacks the instant the opening appears. Their combined ranged strike detonates against the goblin. The boss endures the blast and recovers faster than expected. The tank notices the recovery and realizes the danger is not over. The goblin twists into a heavy follow-up swing aimed at him. He barely holds the blow back with his shield, but the force is overwhelming. At that moment his protection trait activates, strengthening him because his party is behind him. With the boss's attention fixed on him, he announces that he has secured aggro. Using that opening, the swordsman dives in from above to join the assault. His strike lands cleanly and tears into the goblin. The hit explodes across the boss's upper body, staggering it again. Seeing the plan work, the tank believes they can stabilize the first phase. The swordsman abruptly warns that another pattern is coming sooner than expected, confusing the others. He notices the boss has already dropped below the trigger threshold and realizes phase timing has shifted ahead of schedule. The tank is caught off guard by how suddenly the situation changes. The goblin slams down and prepares a new attack sequence. Before it can complete the pattern, the swordsman cuts in and interrupts it with a precise strike. Blood sprays as the boss is forced out of its action again. The tank stares in disbelief at how effortlessly the interruption happened. The swordsman keeps moving without hesitation, already setting up the next exchange. He declares the pattern shut down as if this level of boss behavior is trivial to him. The scene shifts to an interview framing Kaiser's party as the strongest group in the game and asks for the secret behind their success. Kaiser answers simply that victory comes from each member doing what they do best. The interviewer notes that a standard party relies on 4 roles: tank, damage dealer, healer, and support. She points out that Kaiser's party lacks a tank and questions whether such a raid should even be possible. Kaiser agrees that tanks are indispensable. He explains that a tank's job is to duel the boss, interrupt its patterns, and absorb its attacks for everyone else. Then he reveals that he personally handles that role, stunning the interviewer. He wears the claim with calm certainty. Back in the raid, the goblin roars as the pressure rises again. The tank struggles to understand how what he is seeing can even be real. He realizes the swordsman is interrupting boss patterns without any crowd control skill, something even dedicated tanks can barely manage. What shocks him more is that this impossible control is coming from a pure damage dealer. The goblin tries to force another attack pattern through brute strength. The swordsman dismisses it as nothing worth fearing. He carves through the boss again, targeting only lethal points and stopping the pattern once more. The back line can only marvel as he repeatedly shuts the boss down with surgical precision. The tank finally grasps that he is witnessing something far beyond ordinary skill. The boss's health crashes to 20%, signaling the next phase. The tank immediately warns everyone that phase 2 is about to begin, and orders them to prepare. The archer and mage answer, relieved they survived the first phase at all. The system announces that the mutant goblin warrior has fallen below 20% and has manifested its trait. The boss stamps down and triggers its warrior trait. Its stats surge as it enters a berserk state, flooding the arena with hostile energy. The swordsman has been waiting for exactly this transformation. He recalls that mutant traits grant bosses unique abilities beyond normal patterns. This goblin possesses 2 such traits, one of them known as 007 Bang. That trait punishes repeated damage types by debuffing the whole party after too many physical hits and reflecting all damage after too many magical hits. The goblin roars as the second phase fully takes hold. The berserk aura immediately slows the party's attack and movement speeds. The archer protests that the boss was already hard enough without a raid-wide debuff layered on top. The swordsman alone remains unaffected because his hero trait blocks mental contamination, ignores berserk, and grants immunity to the mutant effect. Realizing that the debuffs no longer apply to him, he sees the answer at once. The tank orders the others not to attack carelessly and to focus only on surviving until they understand the phase. Still, he asks Kaiser whether there is any way around this mechanic. Kaiser tells him to wait and watch. Then he calmly announces that he will cut the boss apart himself. The tank is left speechless by the sheer confidence of that promise. The swordsman launches into the air and dives back toward the berserk goblin. The boss answers with a massive sweeping attack meant to crush him mid-charge. He meets the blow head-on and redirects it with perfect timing instead of retreating. He slips through the opening he created, already inside the boss's reach. A storm of blue-edged slashes tears across the goblin before it can recover. The others cannot understand why Hyliang is unaffected by the control effects while the rest of them are still suffering. The tank is forced to revise everything he thought he knew about the man's role. As the swordsman's silhouette dominates the battlefield, the tank starts connecting him to the legendary Kaiser himself. The goblin's counterattack collides with another of his strikes and loses the exchange. In that moment the tank recognizes him as a god of battle rather than a simple damage dealer. The swordsman slices through the goblin's face and upper body with ruthless accuracy. He continues the combo without pause, chaining one cut into the next until the boss is overwhelmed. The tank finally names the truth to himself. This man is Kaiser. The goblin tries one last desperate swing. Kaiser turns to meet it with cold focus. He answers with another clean arc that opens the boss further. Without breaking rhythm, he shifts his grip and prepares the finisher. He draws the blade back through a widening trail of blood. Then he commits both hands and all his momentum to the final cut. His killing intent sharpens as the strike descends. In the middle of the assault, his level and swordsmanship proficiency rise, pushing his mastery to level 7. The new proficiency immediately boosts his sword damage, making the finishing sequence even deadlier. He drives straight through the boss's centerline with unstoppable force. A fury effect adds even more damage to the finishing blow. A pillar-like slash erupts through the goblin from head to toe. The boss is split apart, and can no longer fight back. Its body crashes to the ground in pieces beneath Kaiser. The system confirms the mutant goblin warrior's defeat and the dungeon's completion. The rest of the party can only stare at the corpse and admit how absurd what they just witnessed was. The tank begins to speak about Kaiser, still trying to process the revelation. He wonders aloud if the man before him might truly be the real Kaiser. The others are stunned by the implication. All three stand frozen, now seeing their companion in a completely different light. Kaiser remains standing atop the fallen boss as if the outcome had always been certain. The final time is calculated, and the party's clear time takes first place in the rankings. The system restores first place to the record holder and ranks contribution with Kaiser at the top, followed by Best Shield and the others. As first contributor, Kaiser receives the top reward, beginning with the mutant goblin warrior's red leather top. He also obtains the matching red epaulets. The reward list continues with the boss's red great sword and the title throne of the time attack. That hero grade title grants scaling stat growth whenever the record is renewed and permanently boosts all movement speeds. Pleased, Kaiser reflects that goblins are exactly the kind of enemies he likes. To him, goblins are best appreciated when cut to pieces. The party regroups in the cleared arena while checking their rewards. The archer and mage are thrilled by the rarity of the title and the quality of the options it unlocks. Overwhelmed with gratitude, they thank Kaiser and admit they could never have dreamed of rewards like these without him. He brushes off their praise as if he did nothing special. The tank hesitates, still burdened by guilt. He awkwardly offers to show Kaiser the names registered in the rankings, clearly trying to address the mistake. The ranking board reveals that Best Shield's party name now sits in first place. Ashamed, the tank apologizes for not changing the party name beforehand. Kaiser quickly understands what is bothering him. The tank explains that having his name attached to first place could elevate his guild's standing and public recognition. Even in a beginner city, he knows that claiming the top record carries real prestige. He adds that the achievement even places them above a feared rival named Annihilation. So the whole party apologizes and offers compensation for any harm their mistake may have caused. Kaiser only smiles at how seriously they are taking it. He tells them there is no problem. He explains that rankings are automatically registered under the party leader anyway, and he never expected to take first place in the first place. To him, public attention is exhausting and far less valuable than the loot itself. What truly matters to him are the rewards he just secured. Reviewing the drops, he recognizes the warrior set as one of the best equipment sets available in this region. Its rare to rare plus quality makes it exceptional for this stage of the game. Since he walked away with gear of that caliber, he has no reason to resent the ranking issue. The tank still struggles to believe Kaiser can be this unconcerned. Kaiser realizes he still has not fully reassured them. So he repeats that everything is fine and tells them not to feel guilty. His generosity wins them over completely, and they pledge their loyalty while privately admiring the depth of his character as the dungeon begins to close. A blue exit portal opens to send the party back out. As they prepare to leave, the tank admits that he once thought the praise surrounding Kaiser was exaggerated. But after seeing this battle with his own eyes, he finally understands exactly what Kaiser truly is. When his companion urges him on, the young swordsman finally follows the group through the swirling portal. He steps into the transfer without hesitation as the others move ahead. The party is swallowed by the blue magic and carried to their next destination. They arrive in Arde's back alley at a shop that looks ordinary from outside. Inside, the place proves far larger and stranger than expected, confirming that magic is at work. As the others marvel, the swordsman notices someone waiting behind the counter. A hooded figure silently reveals himself as the person they came to meet. The man introduces himself as Calder the Alchemist and immediately demands to know who these visitors are. The party privately decides he seems unpleasant, though they try not to provoke him. The swordsman cuts through the tension by reminding Calder of the urgent request and presenting the blood he needed for his research. Calder is stunned to recognize it as mutant goblin blood, the exact material he wanted. He can barely believe they secured it so quickly, far sooner than he expected. The swordsman calmly confirms that the job is already done. Calder's attitude flips at once, and the system notes that the swordsman's special affinity effect sharply raises Calder's favor. The mutant goblin quest is cleared, rewarding gold, experience, a silver ring made by Calder, and 2 level-ups. More notices follow as Trial 0 ends, the route to the main continent opens, and he receives both a low-grade skill draw ticket and a random skill draw ticket for reaching level 10. His companions celebrate because they have finally earned passage to the main continent. A hidden condition also pays out a rare bonus item, a postcard written by Calder. The swordsman notes the extra reward but sets it aside because another prize matters far more to him. What he truly wants is the skill draw, the chance he has been waiting for since entering the Pantheon. He activates the low-grade draw ticket and summons the cards. Blue beams erupt around him as the draw sequence begins. Compared with the Pantheon's grandeur, the process feels less impressive, but he stays focused on the result. His eye of truth activates, sharpening his perception of the draw. He tells himself not to expect much from a low-grade ticket. The first result is Charging Slash, a common swordsman's skill that lets him lunge while attacking, and he judges it useful enough. He remembers relying on that move often in the past, but it is not the reward he truly cares about. His real target is the random ticket that can produce anything from common to legendary, but the system suddenly warns that his connection time is expiring and a forced shutdown is imminent. Caught off guard, he realizes the session is about to end before he can finish. He remembers that the game imposes a connection limit to stop players from losing themselves in its realism. The revelation hits hard when he learns 10 hours have already passed in what felt like a short time. With only seconds left, he frantically tries to force the random draw through before logout. Panic takes over as he urges himself to hurry. At the last moment, one card flashes with a golden light that suggests a rare result. He reaches for it, but the system cuts him off and begins the forced shutdown. The virtual world vanishes, leaving only the real-world capsule room. He wakes inside the pod in his military facility. Still disoriented, he struggles back to awareness. The abrupt return leaves him frustrated and raw. Morning has already arrived outside in the real world. He quickly gets out of the capsule, intent on checking whether the draw succeeded. Seeing the real clock at 10 o'clock, he realizes the logout happened exactly as the limit hit and takes that as proof the gamble worked. He steels himself before checking the result. He climbs out fully and rushes to reconnect. The system scans his retina, verifies his ID, synchronizes, and reconnects him to God of Savior. He returns to Arde's back alley as the game welcomes him back. The moment he reappears, he immediately opens his interface. He is desperate to confirm the golden flash he saw before logout. The system reveals an unconfirmed skill waiting in storage. He tempers his hopes, realizing the result was not legendary after all, and accepts that his recent luck had already been excessive. The hidden reward turns out to be Backstab, a heroic assassin skill that lets the user move behind a marked target and deliver devastating follow-up damage. He instantly recognizes it as the signature technique that makes assassins so dangerous. He recalls how that skill lets them erase distance and punish ranged fighters no matter how far they try to stay away. What excites him most is that this assassin-exclusive power has somehow fallen into his hands. He immediately imagines how a few more skills like this could turn him into a perfect damage dealer in both PvP and PvE. His dark excitement is interrupted when a brother and sister pass nearby, with the older brother boasting that he can handle everything because he studied the strategy guide. The brother notices the swordsman's strange behavior. They see him clutching his head and acting unnervingly intense. Still drunk on the new skill, he radiates predatory excitement. The siblings decide he looks dangerously unstable and want nothing to do with him. They hurry away, leaving him behind. Only then does he realize he has alarmed them. He regains his composure and turns back to practical matters. Reviewing his inventory, he decides to equip the rare Goblin Warrior armor pieces, the red greatsword, and Calda's ring so he will no longer look like an easy target. Once equipped, he appears in full red warrior gear and feels ready to leave for the main continent. The system warns that he will be transferred to Raven and that leaving Arde means he can never return. He accepts, and a portal opens for the one-way move. As the countdown starts, he regrets that he left his Arde companions without a proper goodbye. He admits to himself that he had grown attached to them in his own way. Still, he decides that if fate allows it, they will meet again, and he steps into the transfer. He arrives in Raven, the first city of the main continent, where every graduate from Arde comes with high expectations. Unlike Arde's country-separated servers, Raven gathers everyone together and becomes the place where parties are formed. For every new player, this city marks the true beginning. His arrival is immediately overshadowed when Raven's knights return from a mission and force the crowd aside. They drag in a bound prisoner who curses and struggles, showing that Raven is far harsher than the beginner zone. System notices explain that new features such as the arena, duels, and workshops are now unlocked, while beginner protections disappear. The city formally welcomes him to the new stage of the adventure. Even the system's safety tip about reporting crimes to the guards reminds him that this place runs by more dangerous rules. He realizes the main continent is where the game finally becomes serious. A cheerful tavern owner immediately tries to sell him Raven's local beer and compliments his new red outfit. Other merchants pile on with invitations, freebies, and food recommendations, eager to attract a well-equipped newcomer. For a moment he understands why some players get distracted by sightseeing instead of hunting. He snaps himself out of it, deciding indulgence can wait. Refocused, he asks himself where to begin hunting. He chooses action over wandering and heads straight into battle. In the Raven Plains, he cuts down goblins with his new red greatsword. The warrior set reveals its special bonus against goblin-type enemies, boosting his stats and damage while filling him with confidence. The set's awe effect terrifies the goblins and crushes their morale before they can properly fight back. He follows up with Leaping Slash, carving through the group in one sweeping attack. The extra damage from the set finishes both the red and blue goblins, and the system confirms the kills. He immediately moves on, keeping up the momentum. With the goblins down, he stands amid the aftermath, sword still humming with power. The great sword grows stronger with each kill, and he becomes almost intoxicated by how perfectly the warrior set suits him. Between the high base stats, bonus damage, and a weapon that snowballs through hunting, he feels nearly unstoppable. He gleefully savors the ease of crushing fresh enemies. As quests pile up smoothly and another level approaches, he checks his progress with satisfaction. Then his eye of truth suddenly reacts to something nearby. He spots a hidden figure approaching through the forest, outlined by his perception skill. The stranger recognizes the expensive warrior set at once and sees him as rich prey. The hidden attacker readies his blade and prepares to strike. Confident that he has found an easy victim, the assassin rushes in to claim the kill. His blade slams into the swordsman's side, but the attack fails to end the fight. The assassin is shocked that his ambush did not work. The swordsman turns toward him in surprise rather than panic. Before the assassin can recover, his accomplices reveal themselves and launch ranged support. The lead attacker orders the group to bring the newcomer down quickly. Arrows and magic projectiles rain in from above as the ambush becomes a coordinated player kill attempt. He sweeps his greatsword in a wide arc and knocks the incoming shots aside. A melee attacker charges in next, trying to overwhelm him at close range. He meets the blow head-on, stopping the axe with raw strength. Without giving the man room to breathe, he shifts into a counterattack. He changes his grip and prepares a decisive strike. One brutal slash cuts the attacker down from behind, ending him instantly. The surviving ambushers realize too late that they picked the wrong target. Even as one of them tries to understand how a swordsman can have backstab, the system marks him as the next target. The marked assassin is thrown off balance as the swordsman closes in. Now looming over him like a monster, the swordsman turns the ambush completely around. With a chilling grin, he mocks the assassin and asks if he is the one who is lost. He reflects that every place has people who refuse to listen, and games are no different. The real danger is not formal arena combat but senseless slaughter outside the rules. He recalls that player killers existed in his old world too, and they thrive here just the same. Their motives vary from greed to cruelty, but the worst of them all are the ones who prey on beginners. Those predators are known as noob hunters, players who kill and loot people who have barely left the starting area. He recognizes the man before him as exactly that kind of scum, so he repeats the taunt, making clear that the hunter has become the hunted. When the mark expires, the assassin finally realizes the swordsman used backstab on him. He cannot comprehend how a swordsman obtained an assassin's signature skill. The system confirms the outcome as the swordsman kills all three attackers and displays their player names. Because they were flagged as villains, the kills are ruled self-defense and do not stain his karma. He notes that aside from Arde's beginner protections, this lawless side of the game works exactly like the brutal world he remembers. Thinking of his former companions only reinforces how unusually kind they had been. He reminds himself that reality is full of people like these killers, and the game merely reflects that truth. Setting the bodies and bitterness aside, he stores the loot and decides to collect his quest rewards. Several goblin-related quests are cleared in succession, bringing silver and experience. More rewards arrive, including a beast tooth necklace, and he levels up to 17, unlocking access to the west gate. Pleased, he heads straight for the newly opened gate. Beyond it lies the forest west of Raven. He has already learned that even NPCs avoid this hunting ground and warn others away from it. Unlike the open eastern plains, the western route offers no visibility or safety. The dense woods choke the view and make every step dangerous. It is not only goblins there, but swarms of giant insects as well. The place is infamous for surprise attacks from goblins and insects striking from blind spots in trees and rocks. Those conditions have made the West Forest notoriously difficult and created an unwritten rule for entering it. Anyone going in is expected to form a party of at least 3. That is why the area before Raven's West Gate is packed with players recruiting groups. Shouts for tanks, damage dealers, and escorts fill the entrance as everyone searches for a safe party. One group complains that they only need a healer, but none can be found. They conclude that healers are scarce because the class is tedious to level and unpopular to play. Nearby players notice the swordsman and point him out to each other. Watching him walk alone toward the deadly West Forest, they dismiss him as just another fool flying straight into the fire. A swordsman grumbles that nearly all the rankers formed parties for the West Gate, leaving slim pickings. As others sneer at the lone man passing by, they question who he thinks he is for going alone. He only smirks, clearly unconcerned by their judgment. He heads into the Red Forest, where the mood shifts from gossip to a killing ground. He cuts down a Red Forest goblin in one stroke and immediately earns confirmation of the kill. Without slowing, he tears through more goblins with brutal, efficient swings of his oversized blade. When another goblin dives at him from above, he calmly prepares a counter. He slams his weapon into the ground hard enough to create a shockwave. The blast throws the attacker off balance before it can land a clean hit. He follows through with a kick that launches the goblin away. The creature bounces helplessly across the ground under the force of the blow. Still alive but broken, it tries to rise as blood spills from its mouth. He finishes it with a sweeping strike that carves through the battlefield. As the slash clears, he notices thrown blades coming at him from behind. He spins his sword in a tight arc and deflects the incoming knives before they can reach him. Another goblin rushes in shrieking, trying to exploit the opening. His eyes sharpen and he instantly shifts into a more dangerous rhythm. He launches himself and his weapon into a spinning maneuver that carries him over the enemy. The attack lands cleanly, slicing the goblin apart in passing. He drives the blade onward through the terrain, turning the momentum into another devastating cut. Then the warrior's set bonus shuts off, leaving him surrounded by fresh goblins just as the pressure rises. The goblins close in, sensing weakness and screaming for the kill. He stays confident, deciding he does not need the full armor set for opponents at this level. System effects unlock weapon freedom and basic weapon skills, and he activates backstab despite wielding a different class's weapon. A goblin realizes too late that he has already moved into position behind it. He crushes it from above with a basic axe technique called downward strike. More goblins rush him from every direction, trying to overwhelm him by numbers. He answers with a wide, circular axe sweep that cuts through several at once. Another goblin is split open as the spinning attack continues. Pleased by the heft of the axe, he notes that the weapon suits this kind of slaughter. The field falls quiet under a pile of corpses, and his axe mastery rises to level 2. A sudden tremor interrupts the cleanup, hinting at something larger nearby. He confirms the goblin quest is finished, and turns his attention to the pendant quest next. Before he can move on, he senses another threat and looks back. A giant forest centipede bursts from the ground behind him, shattering the earth in a surprise attack. Its maw opens with dripping venom, revealing a far nastier enemy than the goblins. He curses under his breath, realizing the ambush came at the worst moment. The centipede launches him skyward with a violent strike from below. It chases after him through the air, trying to finish him before he can recover. He twists aside as the monster crashes past, barely avoiding being crushed. Knowing he cannot afford hesitation, he roars and commits to a counterattack. He brings his great sword down toward the creature's head as he drops back into range. A fierce grin spreads across his face once he sees an opening. The centipede exposes its mouth to attack, practically offering him a target. He drives a heavy slash straight into that opening, blasting fluid and force outward. The strike ruptures the inside of its head and shatters its core from the front. The giant body crashes to the ground in pieces while he lands and runs through the impact. He steadies himself amid the dust, ready in case it still moves. The centipede convulses and screams, but its death is already certain. He is briefly startled by the sudden collapse, then tracks the body carefully. As it falls, he braces his sword against the remains to keep from being dragged down with it. Pinned in the tangle of legs for a moment, he grimaces at the mess. He swaps to a glowing blue axe-like weapon and complains that the thing is disgusting to look at. Annoyed that the monster keeps presenting its face, he hacks directly into it. The head caves in further under the blow, spraying more fluid. He raises the weapon again for a final, decisive finish. Another crushing slash tears through the upper body and ends the struggle completely. The giant centipede finally lies still at his feet. The system confirms the giant forest centipede's defeat, raises his swordsmanship proficiency to level 10, and grants a level up. He plants the great sword into the ground and takes a breath after the fight. Checking his status, he sees that the hunt has pushed him up 2 levels already. He judges the area harsh but worthwhile, since the leveling pace is excellent and most quests are now cleared. Reviewing what remains, he narrows his focus to the last unfinished objective. That final task is the Lost Pendant quest, the only normal plus quest among the Westgate requests, and it promises a special gift from Camilla. Since the quest itself is simple, he decides there is no reason to overcomplicate it. Because he already knows where the pendant appears, he heads out to collect it directly. At the pendant's spawn point, a crowd has already formed and guards are trying to keep order in the line. The line turns chaotic as people shove and deny responsibility while trying to get closer. Watching from the side, he identifies the exact tree where the pendant respawns. He is relieved the queue is not longer, since otherwise this trivial errand would waste far more time. Then he overhears nearby players discussing an execution order placed on a group of griefers. They mock the target as some assassin brat, and say he deserves whatever is coming. One of them adds that the troublemaker had apparently been calling himself Kaiser. That name jolts him, and he is stunned that his own alias is now circulating publicly. The men dismiss the rumor as fake, laughing at the idea of a swordsman using assassin skills. Their disbelief reassures him a little, but he decides he still needs to keep a lower profile. He realizes that if word spreads about a swordsman with assassin abilities and 6 traits, the guilds will never ignore it. Some would try to recruit him, but many more would try to eliminate him before he grows stronger, especially those tied to Temrock. He remembers the ruthless rule of powerful factions: if they cannot control a talent, they destroy it. He retrieves the lost pendant, and receives the system prompt to deliver it to Camilla. Even with the item in hand, he decides it is still too early to reveal himself openly. Back in Raven, Camilla immediately recognizes the pendant as hers. She thanks him with heartfelt relief, and the quest completion rewards push him to level 20 while granting a random skill draw ticket. Because he returned her treasured keepsake, Camilla gives him her most prized collection item, a mysterious random box. He accepts the gift, gently warns her not to lose the pendant again, and treats her kindly. That kindness triggers his affinity title, causing Camilla's affection for him to rise sharply. As she happily calls him Big Brother and waves goodbye, he notes how unusually large the affinity gain was. With that errand done, he turns to the next quest on his list. He chooses a rare quest to subjugate a dungeon outside the West Gate, mainly because it also rewards a skill draw ticket. Thinking it through, he narrows the likely targets to the Goblin Chief's den or the Ant Nest. The Goblin dungeon would suit his current warrior gear better, but both dungeons normally require a party. He would rather not expose his unusual abilities yet, so he hesitates over how to proceed. At the Goblin Chief's den, he finds a large crowd gathered at the entrance. Recruiters are loudly searching for a fire mage, making it clear what role is most valued there. Merchants and support players have gathered too, turning the dungeon entrance into a bustling marketplace. Seeing even production-type players assembled here, he realizes how serious the run is for everyone involved. Nearby, a thief is openly rejected from a party simply because of his class. Others insist only people useful against the Goblin Chief should be taken, and they shut the thief down without hesitation. A level 20 mage is immediately courted by multiple groups, proving how desperate the parties are for magic users. Watching this, he concludes no one here is looking for a swordsman like him. He reflects that class value in this dungeon depends on the boss's traits, and here mages dominate the hierarchy completely. That leaves swordsman at the bottom, which irritates him more than he wants to admit. Just then, someone specifically calls out to the man wearing the warrior set. A blonde swordsman unexpectedly invites him to join their party, even after hearing he is a swordsman. The recruiter explains their levels are higher and they only need help for a quest, so his class supposedly does not matter. The offer feels wrong to him, and he immediately wonders whether he should play along. He decides to accept for now, masking his suspicion behind easy gratitude. The party forms under the name Bastard Sword, with 3 level 24 members and Kaiser as the 4th. Seeing the setup, he quietly concludes these people are not what they pretend to be. Their predatory expressions confirm his suspicion that they already know exactly who he is. Elsewhere in the crowd, others identify him by the name Kaiser, the warrior set, and the great sword. They agree there is no chance this is a coincidence, and conclude he must be the same target from the rumors. One of the hunters coldly notes that a swordsman like that is rare enough to stand out anywhere. The invitation scene repeats in his mind as he re-examines every word for hidden intent. He recalls how they knowingly invited a swordsman despite the dungeon's bias against that class. Their excuse about levels and quests now sounds less generous and more calculated. Even his own acceptance feels, in hindsight, like stepping into a trap on purpose. The party roster confirms he is the only lower-level member among 3 stronger players. Inside the dungeon, the system identifies the Goblin Chieftain's habitat and explains that a cursed goblin legend now rules it. The party quickly kills a red goblin scout, but the system warns that its death has already alerted the chieftain. The blonde leader treats the warning lightly and boasts that the dungeon is easy. Kaiser watches their performance and admits they are genuinely strong with good teamwork. A new system warning announces that the frightened chieftain has sent out soldiers, forcing the party to prepare for battle. Red eyes appear in the darkness ahead as the incoming goblins close in. Instead of taking the front themselves, the others offer Kaiser the first wave and promise to step in only if things get dangerous. The mage frames it as a harmless chance to sync up, but the pressure behind the suggestion is obvious. He understands that they are testing his real combat ability. Rather than refuse, he decides to keep playing along and reveal only what he chooses. He opens with charging slash, exploding forward before the goblins can surround him. The rush attack tears through multiple enemies in a single violent pass. Watching from behind, the others confirm to each other that they have found the right Kaiser. They judge his performance as impressive, but their tone is analytical rather than friendly. They note that he avoids fatal points deliberately, and still moves unusually fast despite wielding a great sword. Even while admitting his gear should make him viable here, the leader cannot shake the feeling that something about him is off. The paladin presses the issue, questioning whether mere equipment could explain how an assassin was defeated by someone like this. They concede his damage and speed are exceptional, but that still does not explain the earlier 3-on-1 result. The assassin they are discussing had stealth and paralysis poison, making that loss even harder for them to accept. The mage cuts off the speculation and insists that overthinking is pointless as long as they deal with him in the end. The others agree to finish the job quickly and be done with him afterward. They put on cheerful faces again and suggest moving deeper into the dungeon. The leader quietly reminds his allies to keep their expressions normal and continue acting friendly around Kaiser. Kaiser keeps cutting down goblins while pretending not to notice the shift around him. The leader praises him openly, using flattery to keep him relaxed. They admit they invited him because he looked capable enough to clear the dungeon almost by himself. Kaiser answers politely and pretends to take the compliment at face value. When he asks how they found someone this good, the paladin smugly claims it was simply talent for recruitment. Internally, Kaiser judges them as shameless for abandoning a party member ahead and still acting righteous about it. He concludes they would discard him the moment it became convenient, and would strip his equipment if he died. So when they suggest moving on after a short rest, he agrees outwardly while preparing for betrayal. One of the hidden hunters resolves to kill Kaiser quietly as soon as the right chance appears. Jae-won steels himself, knowing the next move will demand more than brute force. He immediately proves his speed by cutting down a goblin before the others can react. A second goblin falls just as fast, showing the party that he is controlling the pace of the fight. He uses the blast from the kill to shield himself, while staying perfectly composed. The swordsman blames the mage's aim, but she insists the goblin moved in a way that should not have been possible. As the party hesitates, they start wondering whether Jae-won is simply getting lucky. Jae-won realizes they still refuse to strike him even when he leaves himself open, so he decides to wait a little longer. Before that standoff resolves, the boss chamber opens and forces everyone deeper into the dungeon. A warning announces that the goblin chieftain has noticed the intruders, and the party braces for a real battle. The system reveals that elite red goblin soldiers are moving in to block them, marking a sharp rise in danger. The elite goblins charge as a coordinated vanguard, forcing the humans into immediate defense. The swordsman orders Kaiser to hold the elites so the rest can move on to the boss. That plan collapses at once when Jae-won vanishes from where they expected him to be. The swordsman is thrown off balance by losing track of the one person he thought he understood. The paladin realizes too late that Jae-won has already slipped ahead toward the real objective. The swordsman finally senses the danger in front of him, but his reaction comes a moment too late. An elite goblin crashes into him and forces him into a direct clash he can barely hold. At the same time, the paladin is pinned down by another elite and loses any chance to pursue Jae-won. The swordsman tells the mage to ignore him and finish the boss quickly while he buys time. She agrees and starts preparing a spell, desperate to salvage the situation. Instead of a spell, a huge boulder suddenly appears above her, turning her casting into panic. She barely manages to deflect it, but the attack exposes how vulnerable she is when pressured. For a split second she is too stunned to understand what just happened. The answer arrives with a heavy step that announces the boss itself. The goblin chieftain emerges, and the system explains that despite its cowardly nature, it becomes fiercely vengeful when its tribe is harmed. The paladin starts to call for a standard aggro strategy, assuming the party can still recover. Jae-won ignores that plan and calmly walks away from them instead. The mage cannot understand how he escaped their control so completely. Jae-won returns carrying the assassin's weapon, revealing that he has already dealt with the missing teammate. He confirms their connection to the assassin and makes it clear he has judged them by it. The mage tries to negotiate, arguing that enemies can still cooperate long enough to clear the dungeon. Jae-won pretends to accept the logic, sounding almost reasonable for a moment. That false reassurance makes the mage lower her guard just enough to be fatal. Jae-won kills her from behind before the alliance can even begin. He openly rejects any partnership with people who were planning to betray him first. The system confirms the mage was a villain, validating his suspicion and removing any penalty to his karma. Jae-won takes the confirmation as proof that his read on the party was correct from the start. He reveals that he used back grab to hide first, letting the dead assassin's body conceal his movement. Even he is mildly impressed that the trick worked so well on a corpse. The swordsman, still struggling against an elite, is horrified that Jae-won killed the mage in the middle of the boss fight. Jae-won answers his outrage with cold amusement rather than apology. The swordsman demands an explanation, still hoping there is some logic he can appeal to. Jae-won states his rule plainly. He never joins hands with people who intend to stab him in the back. To him, anyone who sides with that kind of person is already rotten as well. The swordsman recognizes the dagger, and realizes Jae-won truly looted it from the assassin he killed. Jae-won notices how quickly the swordsman identified the weapon and uses that reaction to press the point. The swordsman cannot make sense of a swordsman using an assassin's dagger, and fears what Jae-won intends to do with it. He warns that killing them now will leave Jae-won alone against the dungeon, as if that threat still matters. Then he reveals the key mechanic of the boss, explaining that the goblin chieftain's selfish defense blocks physical attacks. He boasts that this is why mages dominate this dungeon, and assumes Jae-won has doomed himself by killing the only one. Jae-won answers with a different solution: status ailments. He points out that a status effect is not the same thing as a simple physical strike. The swordsman thinks the idea is insane, because ordinary bleeding should never be enough to kill a boss like this. Jae-won agrees that normal bleeding would not be enough, which only deepens the swordsman's confusion. The swordsman finally realizes Jae-won is relying on something far outside his expectations. Jae-won moves before the others can fully process it. He slips in and lands the dagger's effect while the swordsman is still locked in combat. The system declares the stat gap overwhelming, yet the assassin's dagger effect still activates, shocking the swordsman. Bleeding is inflicted anyway, and the boosted damage immediately tears through the swordsman's health. The swordsman cannot understand how someone lower level could produce damage this absurd. He tries to rationalize it through gear and levels, but the numbers no longer fit what he is seeing. Jae-won realizes the man cannot grasp the real source of the skill he is using. He recalls that his rare bleeding skill from the level 20 gacha can still scale brutally when the conditions line up. What surprises him most is that the effect can stack in ways the game normally should not allow. By combining a rogue skill with an assassin's weapon, he has created an interaction almost no one would have predicted. The swordsman, coughing blood, can only call it cheating because he has no better explanation. Reduced to desperation, he accuses Jae-won of being a hacker. Jae-won lets him die under the bleeding while the system again confirms he was a villain and that an elite goblin also fell in the chaos. He is more annoyed by the predictable accusation than troubled by the kill. Only then does he remember the paladin is still alive and fighting nearby. The paladin realizes too late that Jaewon's attention has shifted to him next. As his allies lie dead around him, the paladin starts wondering where everything went wrong. He understands the truth at last. The disaster began the moment they chose to target Jaewon. Even now, his only instinct is to run. Jaewon cuts off that hope by moving to finish him. The paladin is struck with the same bleeding effect, and the damage spikes again because of the stat difference. His health crashes into the danger zone almost instantly, leaving him barely conscious. A moment later he dies, and the system records Jaewon's third player kill in the chamber. With the party wiped out and another elite defeated, Jaewon stands alone among the bodies. He judges the dagger's damage respectable and credits part of it to the strength he invested earlier. His stat screen confirms that investment paid off, though he still has many points left to shape his build. The goblin chieftain, still alive, watches him from across the blood-soaked room. One of the last elites finally collapses, leaving the boss without support. The goblin chieftain flies into a rage over the deaths of its subordinates. Jaewon finally turns his full attention back to the boss. He remembers that the real fight was merely delayed while he settled the matter of the traitors. Now that no one else remains, he welcomes the boss as if the battle can finally begin properly. The enraged chieftain lunges straight at him with all its weight and fury. Jaewon plants himself instead of retreating, choosing timing over distance. He meets the charge with a brutal kick to the face that halts the monster's momentum. The boss reels, stunned that a human could stop it so cleanly. Jaewon stays on top of it, pressing the advantage before it can recover. The chieftain crashes hard to the ground, losing both balance and dignity. Jaewon notices a change in the boss's state and senses another mechanic activating. A strange golden force gathers around the chieftain as it braces itself. The system confirms that the goblin chieftain's selfish defense has activated. Jaewon answers by drawing on the assassin's dagger again, now charged with a different energy. He carves through the boss in a rapid series of slashes, attacking faster than the defense can fully compensate. Bleeding is applied again, and the boss's health starts dropping through major thresholds despite its protection. The chieftain is shaken that its superior level is not saving it from this damage. As it bleeds and weakens, Jaewon advances with the calm of someone who already knows the outcome. He decides it is time to end the fight for good. The boss panics and tries to protect itself rather than counterattack. Then its cowardly nature takes over completely, and it turns to flee. Jaewon uses back grab once more, refusing to let the boss escape. The chieftain senses him too late, and can only stammer in fear. Jaewon appears right beside its head, perfectly positioned for the kill. He taunts the fleeing boss, making its terror part of the punishment. The chieftain screams as it realizes there is nowhere left to run. Blood splashes across the cavern wall as Jaewon's final strike lands. The boss falls, and the system announces the defeat of the goblin chieftain. The dungeon is officially cleared, the run is logged, Jaewon levels up, and his dagger proficiency rises. His first reward is a rare leather belt from the chieftain, and he is genuinely pleased by the practical upgrade. He equips it at once, confirms the small health gain, and accepts it as a solid improvement. Jaewon reflects that without a time limit he might even have challenged for a top ranking in this dungeon. Still, he shrugs off that mischance and looks for what else the clear has given him. He remembers there should still be loot left behind by the dead players. The system grants him a dropped item, a rare silver iron shield designed for holy defense. He recognizes it as expensive gear and immediately understands how much money its owner must have spent. Another drop catches his eye, the swordsman's bastard's training sword, a roleplay heavy weapon with a haste effect. Jaewon mocks the dead swordsman's commitment to the act, amused that even his gear matched his identity. He decides a necklace among the spoils is probably the easiest thing to sell later. When his Eye of Truth activates, it interrupts that casual looting with a new discovery. A strange red glow deeper in the cave draws his attention away from the corpses. He first guesses it might be stealth or herbs, but the brightness makes both explanations feel wrong. The system reveals the truth. He has discovered the secret dungeon called Black Goblin Shaman's Hideout. Because he is the first person ever to find it, he gains the title Adept Explorer. Jaewon is stunned for a moment by the sheer rarity of what has appeared. A narration explains that dungeons come in many forms, from parties and bosses to labyrinths and special events. Among all of them, the rarest and least understood are secret dungeons. Even Explorer-class players struggle to locate them, because they appear in absurd places and demand special entry conditions. The system lists those conditions here. Only one survivor, no party, and all requirements fulfilled, making Jaewon realize how brutal the trigger really was. For a party dungeon to hide a secret path that only opens if one person clears it alone without ever forming a party is almost absurd. Jaewon concludes that with conditions this harsh, most people would never benefit from finding one even if they stumbled onto it. Then he reads the details and sees the real prize. This is a hero-grade secret dungeon, far beyond what he expected, and he immediately decides to challenge it. A quoted warning from a veteran ranker compares entering a secret dungeon to putting your head into a beast's mouth. The narration adds that everyone who has survived such places agrees with that grim description. The metaphor is explained through a beast waiting beneath calm water for prey to lower its guard. Once the prey commits, the jaws close before it can escape. That is what a secret dungeon truly is, a trap that opens only to swallow the one who enters. The image of the hidden predator makes clear that discovery is not a reward by itself but an invitation to extreme danger. Jae-won accepts that danger anyway and steps through the portal. The moment he enters, something massive and hostile forms in the darkness ahead of him. A curse orb strikes him immediately, applying darkened vision and narrowing his field of sight. The dungeon wastes no time proving that it intends to overwhelm him from the first second. But his hero trait blocks the mental contamination behind the attack and lets him ignore the worst of the vision curse. Jae-won brushes off the system's violence with a grin, treating the ambush as an introduction rather than a setback. A hidden voice condemns him for entering without permission and calls him a human who has lost all fear. The chamber fills with undead goblins, spiders, and a shaman-like presence, revealing that the secret dungeon is a full-scale death trap. As the undead swarm closes in under the black goblin shaman's control, Jae-won's next battle begins on far deadlier ground. The dungeon reveals its first threat as the black goblin shaman unleashes undead spiders to swarm the intruder. The young hunter is revolted, but he keeps his composure instead of panicking. Their master finally appears and mockingly asks whether his minions have shaken the human. A system appraisal identifies the enemy as Jihad, a long-lived goblin necromancer and a named hero-grade boss, instantly raising the stakes. The hunter realizes that even in a secret dungeon, drawing a named boss is an extraordinary encounter. Instead of fearing it, he starts wondering what kind of reward such a rare fight might bring. Jihad, however, is less interested in boasting than in one mystery: how a human found a hidden place like this at all. Sensing that the intruder carries several different energies rather than the aura of a normal explorer, Jihad judges him to be something unusual. The hunter answers with a taunt, showing he understands the goblin is far sharper than he looks. Jihad decides that curiosity can wait, and sends his undead forward under a surge of necromantic power. The chamber fills with rushing corpses and spiders as the hunter stands still and lets the attack come. He mocks Jihad for dropping his guard and warns that a ranged fighter should never relax against a melee opponent. In the same breath, he turns the moment into a lesson, closing the distance before the goblin can react. Jihad only notices too late that the human has already slipped behind him. A corpse under Jihad's control accelerates with the trait Nimble Fingers, but the hunter has already moved past the trap. The goblin triggers a corpse explosion, trying to catch him in the blast. The explosion tears through the area, but Jihad senses something is wrong before he can celebrate. A flash of alarm crosses his face as he realizes the attack failed to finish the fight. He whips around, searching for the human he thought he had cornered. The hunter reappears in a red aura, now openly radiating killing intent. He reveals the answer by holding up a bloody dagger, proving he struck Jihad during the confusion. A bleeding effect takes hold, and Jihad is stunned that the human landed a hit without him noticing. The hunter calmly repeats the lesson: Jihad should have stayed on guard. Enraged, Jihad abandons mockery and prepares to crush the insolent human. He floods the battlefield with more explosive corpses, determined to see how long the hunter can keep evading. The hunter is forced to leap away as blasts erupt around him. Jihad keeps chaining explosions, trying to herd him into a fatal mistake. The bombardment intensifies into a barrage that leaves almost no safe ground. But amid the chaos, the hunter realizes he can read Jihad's aim and predict where each attack will land. He begins understanding not just the direction of the attacks, but the goblin's intent behind them. Using that insight, he threads through the corpses and explosions without being caught. Jihad, frustrated that his prey still survives, declares that the next strike will end it. He escalates to a mass corpse explosion, turning the entire area into one giant detonation. Jihad boasts that he had meant to preserve this rare specimen, but the human has forced him to stop holding back, even as the hunter's mark effect expires. Yet when the smoke clears, the hunter is suddenly right beside him again, close enough to whisper in his ear. He needles Jihad by asking whether even that grand skill managed to miss. Before the goblin can answer, the hunter drives a punch straight into his face. The blow snaps Jihad's head back and shatters his composure. He spits blood and reels, no longer looking like the untouchable boss he claimed to be. The hunter advances while Jihad stumbles backward in disbelief. Now looming over him like a monster himself, the hunter forces Jihad to confront the reversal in power. Jihad swears revenge, trying to recover his dignity through threats. The hunter answers with another brutal body blow that cuts the threat short. He follows with a rapid series of punches, refusing to let Jihad regain distance. The beating continues in a relentless flurry that overwhelms the goblin completely. At last Jihad breaks and begs for a pause. He complains absurdly that striking his bones is unfair, turning the life-and-death battle into pathetic whining. The hunter can only stare, wondering what kind of boss starts crying about sore bones mid-fight. He concludes that despite the title, this enemy is nowhere near what a true hero-grade monster should feel like. Even allowing for the power of corpse explosion, Jihad still seems far too weak for his rank. Jihad notices the contempt in the hunter's silence and grows uneasy. In desperation, he begins channeling another power while the hunter watches. The hunter pauses, sensing that something has changed. Jihad reveals that he had been waiting for exactly this moment, when the human would lower his guard. A system alert explains that the boss is manifesting his bloodline factor. Another warning makes the danger clear: once the manifestation finishes, Jihad's stats will rise. The hunter immediately understands that a jump from hero to hero plus grade would change the fight entirely. Knowing raids at that level normally require a full team, he decides he cannot allow the transformation to complete. He charges before the ritual can finish, gambling everything on a fast kill. At the same time, he dumps newly earned points into strength, pushing the stat past a major threshold. His warrior set activates and grants bonus damage against goblin-type enemies, sharpening the gamble into a killing blow. His attack lands with explosive force. Additional fury and swordsmanship bonuses stack on top of the strike, and Jihad can only protest that the damage is absurd. The hunter accepts that absurdity, deciding that overwhelming force is exactly what the situation demands. He cleaves through Jihad in a single decisive slash before the bloodline manifestation can finish. The goblin dies in shock, and the system confirms that the secret dungeon boss Jihad Black has been defeated. The dungeon is cleared, and the victory is recorded in the Book of Adventure. Because he is the first to clear it, the system amplifies the rewards, grants a level increase, and delivers the dungeon clear loot. One reward is a hero-grade orb containing the vengeful spirit of the Black Goblin Shaman, usable by Necromancer and Mage-type classes. Another is the Shaman's Robe, a hero-grade item that interferes with facial recognition when the hood is raised, and the hunter is thrilled by how valuable the haul is. He decides that even if the robe's special option is vague, it is too useful to ignore. Then he notices a stranger prize, a mysterious object called a trace of a forgotten clan with an unreadable grade. The unknown rank reminds him of unidentified items from Demrock, suggesting it may be more important than it first appears. He sets the mystery aside for later, only to notice yet another reward appearing. This time it is an unidentified card, which catches him completely off guard. He recalls that in God of Savior, cards are used not only for skills and enchantments but also to record monsters in the Book of Adventure. If this is a monster card, he guesses it should function like a special summon or enchantment. The card identifies itself as Jihad Black Soul, a hero-grade guardian card that summons the goblin as a protector and vanishes after use. He remembers that guardians are beings that protect their user, like the famous salamander and golem examples from other classes. Even so, he is not impressed, because ordinary guardians are expensive and often disappointing. Unless they are divine beasts like the legendary companions of top players, he considers most guardians more trouble than they are worth. Still, curiosity wins, and he activates the summon. Jihad reappears as a tiny level 1 guardian with sealed abilities, 0 loyalty, and traits that openly describe him as opportunistic and unreliable. The goblin is horrified to find himself bound to the very human who killed him. The hunter is equally horrified that this pitiful creature is supposed to be his guardian. Compared with the majestic guardians he imagined, this is a crushing disappointment. Jihad immediately starts lamenting that he has become the servant of a filthy human, proving the hunter's fears correct. The hunter studies the guardian traits and wonders what kind of cursed personality profile he has just acquired. The system answers bluntly that Jihad's loyalty is dangerously low, and that he may betray his master if left unchecked. The hunter realizes he has summoned a walking backstab warning. Seeing how openly hostile the goblin remains, he decides he cannot let this behavior continue. He steps toward Jihad with disciplinary intent, and the goblin instantly senses danger. Jihad nervously asks what the human wants. The hunter takes offense at being called human by his own servant, and treats it as insolence. He explodes in anger and makes it clear that disrespect will not be tolerated. Jihad freezes, suddenly understanding that his new master is serious. The hunter declares that the goblin's mindset is rotten and announces a brutal plan to fix it through repeated beatings. Jihad can only stare, not yet grasping what that means. The hunter clarifies with a smile that the lesson will begin immediately. Jihad's bravado collapses into fear. The cave echoes with impacts as the hunter attacks his own guardian to force obedience. With each blow, Jihad's loyalty ticks upward little by little, proving that pain is somehow working. Later, the story shifts back to the real world as evening settles over the city. A door opens, transitioning from dungeon violence to ordinary home life. At home, the hunter stretches after returning and notices it is already evening. Hungry, he asks his mother whether there is anything to eat, and she casually asks whether he left something at home. He notices his younger sister lounging on the couch with snacks. He silently judges the scene as a very familiar kind of laziness. Sitting beside her, he learns their mother is out and asks what she is watching. When she answers that it is God of Savior content, he is startled to discover she plays the game too. She casually reveals that she is already level 71, which shocks him. He is so surprised that he momentarily loses his composure. Trying to recover, he asks how long she has been playing. She says only about 6 months, having started because a friend offered to carry her, and she ended up enjoying it. That answer makes him wonder whether reaching the 70s is supposed to take that long. She dryly reminds him that not everyone spends absurd amounts of time grinding the game like he does. He falls silent, unable to argue with that. The television shifts to a segment about the Hero Guild, and his sister immediately recognizes them. He asks what the Hero Guild even is. She explains that they are one of the hottest groups among people in their 20s, popular enough to rival major celebrities. He cannot understand why a non-top 10 group would draw that much attention. Her answer is brutally simple: because they are handsome, starting with their striking guild master verse. She insists that, for most girls, Looks matter more than raw ranking, even compared with stronger players like Mayalsel. He dismisses Vers as too pretty to be impressive. She doubles down, praising Vers as the perfect mix of handsome and beautiful and putting him far above her brother. He retaliates with a petty insult, but he is clearly losing the exchange. Unable to compete with her fangirling, he decides to escape by going to work out, while she notes that a face like Vers naturally makes his channel popular. That last word stops him, because he has no idea what NewTube is. She explains that all the major groups run channels there now, and some videos even pull 100 million views. The number hits him harder than any dungeon boss. He immediately jumps to the money, asking whether that means Vers earns a fortune, and she says she has heard it can reach $1 billion. His mind instantly converts the sum into fried chicken and short circuits from the scale of it. He starts repeating the number to himself as if trying to physically process it. Still muttering about $1 billion, he staggers away while his sister watches in confusion. He shuts himself off, consumed by the revelation that gaming fame can turn into real money. His sister can only conclude that he is acting strangely. Back in the game, the system confirms his identity and reconnects him to God of Savior. Now in a forest, he decides to start recording his gameplay because it might become useful later. A portal opens and Jihad arrives, greeting him with surprising familiarity. The hunter immediately notices the missing honorifics and calls the goblin out for getting too comfortable. Jihad hastily corrects himself, and the hunter waves it off, telling him to use whatever title feels natural. He then hands the goblin the robe and orders him to put it on. He reasons that he cannot equip it himself right now, while Jihad at least needs proper clothing, but the system punishes the remark with a drop in loyalty. Jihad interprets the gift as a sign of freedom and starts to romanticize the gesture. The hunter is stunned by how wildly the goblin has misread the situation. Jihad quickly backtracks and thanks him, which restores the lost loyalty. The hunter can only sigh at how unstable this relationship is, comparing the loyalty meter to a rubber band. Once dressed, Jihad asks where they are headed next. The hunter answers with a grin that they need to run. Jihad is left confused as the hunter prepares to drag him into whatever comes next. With a final hiss and burst of force, the battle in the forest comes to an end. System notices confirm that he has cleared both the forest red goblin and a giant spider, leaving the clearing littered with corpses. His small hooded goblin companion pities the monsters that cross paths with someone so merciless. The companion reflects that the victims were unlucky enough to meet a man who fights like a demon. When the man calls, the goblin's servant hurries over at once. The master settles down to rest while the servant approaches for orders. He tells the goblin to sort the loot and try turning the dead into undead, and the servant obediently accepts. The goblin begins the necromantic task exactly as instructed. It moves to the fallen goblin bodies to start the experiment. Dark magic surges out as the servant casts the spell to raise the dead. The corpse responds, taking on the glow of undeath. A system message confirms that Guardian Jihad Black has successfully converted a forest red goblin into an undead. The servant reports success, admitting it could once have raised a whole legion but can only manage a few for now. The master approves, already seeing how useful this ability will become later. The goblin starts issuing commands to the newly raised undead. To the master's surprise, the undead goblins immediately run off instead of standing by. He asks where they are going, confused by their sudden departure. The servant explains that it sent them to gather the dropped items for him. He realizes the little goblin is already automating the tedious work for him. His thoughts shift back to leveling, and he grumbles that reaching level 2 is taking too long and wishes some elite monsters would appear. The servant perks up at the mention of elite mobs and says it knows where they are. That answer jolts him into full attention. The goblin explains that the elites do not roam and instead stay gathered in one place. The moment he hears that, his excitement spikes at the thought of a whole cluster of elite enemies. The story shifts toward a different part of the forest as he heads for this opportunity. A camp of goblin warriors comes into view, with multiple armed goblins resting together around a fire. Hidden in the brush with his servant, he confirms these are the targets the goblin meant. Seeing so many elites together, he can barely contain his excitement. As he counts the gathered warriors, a sudden quest is generated. The system names it Trial of the Warriors, gives it a 48-hour limit, and offers gold, experience, an intermediate skill draw ticket, and an unknown bonus. The intermediate skill ticket alone is enough to make him decide he will clear the quest no matter what. One goblin notices something is wrong just as he makes his move. He explodes from hiding and charges straight into the camp before they can organize. He greets them almost casually, already committed to slaughter. A goblin warrior answers with a furious sword strike. He slips past the opening attack, forcing the goblin to overextend. The warrior tries to recover with brute force. It roars in frustration as he stays inside its reach. He counters with a brutal close-range blow to the face. The goblin's face caves in under the impact, dropping the first warrior instantly. Using the momentum, he launches himself into the rest of the camp before they can surround him. He draws a dagger and channels energy into a skill attack. Vital Thrust carves through multiple goblins in one sweeping rush, opening deep wounds across the group. The system inflicts bleeding on the targets, ensuring the damage will keep worsening. He lands in control while the wounded goblins collapse or stagger back. Another warrior charges him head-on with a heavy overhead slash. He blocks the blow with his dagger, but the clash shows how dangerous these elites are at close range. He immediately reaches for his oversized sword to answer with something heavier. The goblin realizes too late that the fight has shifted in his opponent's favor. He smashes the warrior down with overwhelming force, crushing it into the ground. The goblin spits blood, still barely alive after the impact. He follows through without hesitation, drawing his great blade back for the finish. He brings the sword down in a killing arc before the goblin can recover. The warrior can only roar as death closes in. His expression hardens into cold focus as he commits fully to the execution. The strike lands with savage force, turning him into a blood-soaked silhouette. The dying goblin can only choke as it realizes it has lost. When the dust settles, the camp is strewn with bodies and blood, and he stands alone at the center. Watching from cover, the servant can only think that its master is monstrous in battle. It admits this same feeling struck it before, and concludes that the man is no ordinary human. To the goblin, he now looks like a devil wearing human skin. A massive impact suddenly shakes the battlefield, announcing a far stronger presence. He notes that he has already dealt with the ordinary warriors and decides the real target has finally arrived. A hidden field boss appears, and the quest escalates into Trial of the Great Warrior, as Goblin Great Warrior Karuk charges in. The system identifies Karuk as an elite named Hidden Field Boss with Great Warrior, Body Enhancement, and Berserker traits. Instead of fear, he greets the boss like a treasure chest finally opening. Karuk's first attack slams into the ground with enough force to threaten his weapon itself. He dashes to reposition, trying to avoid taking the full brunt of the boss's power. Both fighter and boss accelerate toward each other for a direct clash. The servant panics, convinced this enemy is still beyond its master's current level. It warns that Karuk's skill will shatter the sword the instant it connects. He narrows his eyes and chooses to meet the attack anyway. Karuk unleashes Ruthless Strike with a full power overhead blow. The axe crashes down in a devastating impact meant to break both guard and weapon. Karuk expects the exchange to end there. The servant can only stare, unable to believe what it is seeing. Instead of breaking, the master catches the attack on perfect timing with his batted sword. A grin spreads across his face as he realizes the technique worked. Karuk is visibly shaken that his killing blow was stopped. The boss roars and tries to force through with raw strength. He adjusts his grip at the critical instant, turning defense into redirection. The clash bursts outward as he deflects the attack rather than simply enduring it. Karuk's own power is thrown offline, scattering the boss's momentum. The servant struggles to understand what kind of swordsmanship it is witnessing. As the redirected force whips around them, it finally recognizes the technique. He names it for what it is, parry. The system explains that parry deflects an opponent's attack but fails if the timing is even slightly off. It is revealed as a swordsman's only guard skill and one powerful enough to neutralize even legendary techniques under the right conditions. Its terrible success rate is exactly why almost no one dares rely on it in real combat. The system confirms he used parry successfully, and he marvels that such a broken technique came from a low-tier draw. Karuk's Ruthless Strike is fully turned back on him. The redirected force detonates in a violent backlash. Seizing the opening, he leaps behind the boss with his great sword raised. Karuk senses the counterattack too late and twists in alarm. He realizes the boss's skill is on cooldown and mocks that brief vulnerability. Karuk can only roar back in fury. The servant freezes, watching the finishing blow unfold. He cuts Karuk down in one decisive strike, and the system records the Hidden Field boss's defeat. The quest Trial of the Great Warrior is completed, rewarding him with 200 gold, a large amount of experience, 2 intermediate skill draw tickets, and Karuk's leather set. He is ecstatic, especially over getting 2 draw tickets from a single boss. He celebrates wildly while the servant watches in silence. The goblin sighs that its master has become ridiculous again the moment the fighting ended. It thinks that in battle he becomes a true demon, but outside battle he turns absurdly simple-minded whenever rewards appear. The contrast leaves the servant baffled. Still riding the high, he immediately uses one of the intermediate skill draw tickets. The system opens a new draw in a swirl of glowing cards. He receives Ascending Dragon Kick, a rare martial artist attack skill, and Striking, a rare buffer skill that grants a large physical attack boost. He is even more excited by Striking after realizing it can function as near-permanent bonus attack power because its duration matches its cooldown. In practice, that means even an ordinary sword can hit with the force of a great sword while the buff is active. He is thrilled by the idea of a damage dealer who can buff himself and fight alone. Adding Ascending Dragon Kick on top of that makes the draw feel perfect to him. His attention then shifts to the unidentified item among the boss rewards. The system reveals hero-grade red leather top and bottom pieces made from Karuk's hide. It also reveals rare shoulder armor and a hero-grade essence ring, and he is delighted to finally replace his ugly goblin gear. He equips the ring first. His appearance changes into the red and blue Great Warrior set, which boosts slam range, melee damage, and all stats, while he also equips the bastard training sword. He admires the new two-tone look, and the servant admits it suits him well. The goblin then confesses that he genuinely frightens it sometimes. He laughs and says the feeling is mutual. Jokingly, he claims even he is afraid of how far he is willing to go. The servant watches his self-satisfied posing with flat disbelief. Inwardly, it decides its master is a complete lunatic. The system suddenly reports that the servant's loyalty has dropped by 1, leaving him confused. He immediately suspects the goblin was insulting him in its head, and the servant hurriedly denies it. He draws his new sword and threatens that any more insolence will be fatal. Terrified, the goblin submits at once, and the system restores the lost loyalty point. Satisfied, he calms down and regains his usual composure. He decides it is time to move on. The servant asks where they are headed next. He answers that they are going to hunt another boss. The goblin encourages him, reasoning that after killing a great warrior, he may as well keep going. Then it remembers something important. The system explains the next progression gate. To reach the next city, he must clear the continent's trial by reaching level 24 and defeating the field boss Spider Queen Eliza. They arrive at the Spider Queen Eliza spawn area, where many adventurers are already gathered among thick webs waiting for the boss to appear. The crowd grows impatient, estimating about 10 minutes remain before the spawn. People speculate about where the queen will emerge this time. The guesses narrow to the western or northern web zones based on previous appearances. He and his servants slip into the waiting crowd without drawing much attention. He asks the goblin whether it knows field boss spawn points too. The servant admits it does not, explaining that this boss belongs to a later generation beyond its knowledge. He can only sigh at how selective the goblin's expertise really is. The servant thinks for a moment anyway, trying to be useful. He stops dwelling on that and focuses on the practical question of where the boss will appear. His plan is simple. Wherever it spawns, he intends to rush in immediately and seize the opening from behind. At that moment, his Slayer trait activates, and the system reveals Spider Queen Eliza's exact location. He is stunned when a red marker suddenly appears before him. He realizes the trait is not limited to bosses he has personally killed, but may reveal all bosses of the relevant type. That possibility hits him hard enough to stop him in his tracks. He starts connecting the implications, wondering if the title works on every boss rather than only his past kills. But he pushes the mystery aside for now, deciding that the only thing that matters is taking down Spider Queen Eliza. He decides the real prize is not merely clearing the trial but taking exclusive control of the field boss by using back grab. A portal opens in front of the waiting group, startling them as his plan begins. Inside the cave, the spider boss is already being called by name, hinting that this monster is tied to someone. He and his goblin-like servant arrive before the target and confirm they have encountered Spider Queen Eliza. When the ambush succeeds, he is briefly impressed that his risky trick actually worked. His servant demands an explanation, but he brushes it off instead of revealing how he pulled it off. He tells the servant to treat the situation as free profit and turns his attention to the boss itself. Seeing Eliza's enormous body and status, he realizes he is facing an elite field boss with steel webs, deadly poison, and sharp detection. Eliza immediately roars and lunges to crush the intruders. He sharpens his focus the instant the attack comes. The spider's charge sends him flying back and proves that a direct clash would be dangerous. He answers by activating back grab again, relying on mobility instead of force. He slips behind Eliza before she can track him, catching the boss off guard. Eliza whips around in confusion, suddenly losing sight of him. He summons a blazing dragon-shaped strike to seize momentum. His ascending dragon kick lands cleanly, and even his gear bonus adds extra damage to the hit. The blow visibly rattles Eliza and interrupts her assault. He reads the opening and prepares to press the advantage. Eliza retaliates with a violent burst of power that tears up the ground around him. He counters by spinning through the pressure with a sweeping sword technique instead of retreating. The spider is stunned that he is still inside her guard and keeps calling for Eliza as if appealing to someone else. He carves across her body in a rapid series of slashes, forcing the boss fully onto the defensive. He plants his footing to keep the combo going rather than letting her recover. Then he rushes straight back in, climbing the attack line toward her head. He activates striking, boosting his attack power for a finishing sequence. Wrapped in that power-up, he charges Eliza head-on. As the spider trembles and keeps crying out, he launches another ascending dragon kick. The dragon-shaped force surges forward again, overwhelming her resistance. He drives the attack directly into her face, crushing her down with brute force. The impact makes her spit poison and howl in pain. He stays on top of her, pinning the boss under relentless pressure. From the side, his servant clicks his tongue and mocks the monster for getting caught so badly. With Eliza collapsed, the hero pauses over her as if the fight is already decided. Even while broken, the spider keeps desperately calling for Eliza. He answers with cold contempt, making it clear he sees only a monster in front of him. He decides to test whether that name will still matter when the creature is dying. The spider's repeated cries become more frantic, as if it is trying to reach someone trapped inside. Hearing the name again and again, the servant begins to react as though it stirs an old memory. He quietly condemns his master's cruelty, now sensing there is more to this than a simple hunt. While the hero keeps hacking at the spider, the servant watches in growing alarm. The servant finally recognizes the name Eliza and realizes he has heard it long ago. That realization hits him all at once. He urgently shouts for his master to stop, interrupting the killing blow. He runs forward and begs desperately for the attack to cease. The hero is baffled and demands to know why he should stop now. The servant rushes to the spider and pleads with Eliza to recognize him. At close range, the broken spider hesitates when she hears the old name Liza. The servant insists that he is the one from her past and begs her to remember him. The spider's eyes fill with tears as recognition begins to surface. The servant's memory pulls him back 150 years to when he first lived alone in the forest. In that past, he heard a tiny voice calling Liza and answered it. He found a strange little spider unlike anything he had seen before. Curious rather than afraid, he picked her up and wondered what kind of creature she was. Instead of leaving her behind, he invited the little spider to come with him. The spider eagerly answered to the simple name Liza. As he lived with her, he started thinking that the name could be better. He decided to rename her Eliza because it sounded more fitting and special. The little spider kept insisting on Liza, showing a playful attachment to the old name. He corrected her and gently insisted that Eliza suited her better. In the end, he overruled her protests and settled on Eliza as her name. He left the cabin one day, promising he would return after going out alone. Eliza wanted to follow him, but he stopped her. He told her the outside world was still too dangerous for her and made her stay behind. He left with a promise to come back soon. Eliza remained behind, trusting that promise. But the master never returned. Days and nights passed while she kept waiting in the cabin. That waiting stretched from days to years and then to decades. After a century, Eliza was still waiting endlessly for the one who had named her. Even when the cabin itself seemed exhausted by the long passage of time, her vigil continued. Eventually she left for the western forest, the place where she had first met him. She repeated the name he had given her so she would never lose it. The servant returns to the present in tears, clinging to the dying spider and calling Eliza's name. The hero bluntly sums up the story as abandonment, forcing the servant to face the truth. The accusation leaves the servant shaken and speechless. He can only cry out Eliza's name again while the hero stands over them. The hero presses further, asking why someone who waited 150 years would hide from the one she loved. The servant admits he cannot explain it because the reason lies beyond what he can currently understand. That answer only confuses the hero more. The servant apologizes for being unable to explain the mystery. The hero pauses to think through the contradiction. He remembers this is still a graduation quest and knows he cannot simply walk away from it. The servant reluctantly agrees, though he is clearly torn. At that moment the dying spider calls for Liza again, drawing the servant's attention. The servant rushes to her, demanding to know what she is trying to say. He immediately rejects the implication before it is even fully spoken. The hero asks what has suddenly come over him. The servant reveals the message he is hearing from Eliza. The hero must stab her. The hero is stunned by the request. The servant refuses to accept it and tries to stop the idea from becoming real. Eliza forces the matter herself by biting down and releasing poison into her own body. The system confirms she has inflicted herself with a deadly poison and driven her health below 10%. The servant is horrified as the boss deliberately pushes herself to the brink of death. He begs her to stop, but she can only repeat Liza's name as her strength fades. He tries to protest, unable to bear what she is choosing. Eliza weakly calls to him one last time. The servant turns to the hero and pleads for him to finish her quickly. When the hero hesitates over the wording, the servant snaps that there is no time and urges him to slash her now. The hero still doubts whether obeying this request can possibly be right. The servant insists that it is the only chance and begs him to strike immediately. Uneasily, the hero accepts the burden and draws his blade. He warns them he is slashing now and commits to the final blow. His strike kills Spider Queen Eliza, and the system records the boss' defeat while granting him a stat increase from predation. After the kill, both he and the servant stare at the fallen body in uneasy silence. The hero asks whether what they just did was truly the right choice, and the servant can only answer weakly that it was. Then the corpse moves again and calls out Liza, proving the matter is not over. A hidden named boss is revealed. The true Eliza was a parasite living inside Spider Queen Eliza, and her loyalty to Jihad is already maxed. The hero realizes the truth at once and understands that the real target was a parasite-type boss all along. He recalls that Demrock had similar bosses that survived by infesting stronger monsters. Those parasites were notorious because they could jump between hosts and force players to kill them more than once. Now that same kind of rare nuisance has somehow fallen into his hands as a new subordinate. Checking her details, he sees that the tiny Eliza is a low-ranked but useful soul-type familiar and judges the result worthwhile. Thinking it over, he concludes that Jihad's ability to attract and manage subordinates is becoming extremely valuable. He mentally lists the servant's talents, from gathering items to obeying orders to uncovering hidden areas. The servant, meanwhile, decides his master is basically a walking jackpot. That greedy look from the hero immediately makes the servant nervous. Clutching the tiny Eliza, the servant senses the same ominous excitement from his master and grows uneasy. He gently sets the little Eliza down, still unsure what the hero is planning. The tiny spider hops onto the hero's shoulder, as if claiming her place beside him. The hero tests her old name, and she responds eagerly to Liza. The servant translates her gratitude, explaining that she is thanking the hero for saving her. The little spider happily answers to both versions of her name, delighting in the attention. The servant adds that she wants to repay the hero and is urging him to follow her somewhere. Liza excitedly confirms the invitation herself. Trusting the lead, The hero and servant follow her deeper into the cave. Perched on his shoulder, Liza keeps calling out as she guides him onward. The servant announces that they have arrived at the place she wanted to show him. The hero steps forward to inspect it. The system declares that he has discovered a hidden location. That hidden place turns out to be Spider Queen Eliza's egg hatchery, packed with eggs and spider offspring. The hatchery is full of field boss class offspring, and the hero instantly realizes the scale of the opportunity. He remembers that his graduation quest only required defeating a field boss, and that the term never referred solely to the queen. The quest wording focused on defeating the ruler, but the scoring was based on how effectively he hunted field bosses overall. He realizes the ranking depends on how thoroughly he wipes out Eliza's forces, not just whether he killed the queen. That insight gives him a new idea. If he clears out every offspring here, his score should soar. A grin spreads across his face as he decides to exploit the loophole. He openly wonders whether he should check out just how far this can go. Without waiting for debate, he launches the first devastating strike into the hatchery. Then he dives into the swarm, cutting through the offspring before they can surround him. He keeps carving a path through the mass of spiders, turning the nest into a slaughter. Explosions of blood and shattered bodies fill the chamber as the hatchery is torn apart. He continues the massacre in a blur of red arcs and green ichor. His spinning follow-up attacks wipe out whole clusters at once. Watching from safety with Liza on his shoulder, the servant can only acknowledge what he is seeing. He concludes with awe that his master is absurdly strong. The offspring collapse around him in heaps as the slaughter continues. When the last of them falls, the system confirms he has completed the first trial of the field boss hunt. It also confirms 1 hidden field boss and 34 field boss kills, meaning he has passed the trial. His score jumps to S rank, he takes first place, and he earns the title's first S rank and top graduate. With the throne effect activating and all his stats rising again, he revels in the surge of power and recognizes this intoxicating feeling. After the Spider Queen's fall, the young man notices the tiny spider Liza and realizes she is trying to get his attention. Grateful for help far beyond what he expected, he thanks Eliza, but his goblin companion interrupts to say the debt is not repaid yet. The goblin relays Eliza's message that she still has something important to give him. He turns in confusion as Liza insists on being noticed. Following the goblin's direction, he looks toward the place where Liza supposedly left her gift. He activates Eye of Truth to inspect the strange red light embedded in the cavern wall. The system identifies the object as a fragment of fate. The discovery shocks him because it sounds like the trigger for something much bigger than loot. Elsewhere, a crowd of players gathers at the spider cave, convinced Eliza must still be inside because every other location has already been cleared. Their leader steadies the group and urges them to enter, kill Eliza, and regroup in Brian as planned. The crowd rallies behind the plan, believing victory is right in front of them. That confidence collapses when a system notice announces that Spider Queen Eliza has already been defeated and the continent trial is ending. The players panic, unable to understand how the boss died before even spawning for them, especially since no rival guild arrived first. As they scramble for answers, someone checks the live rankings for the identity of the killer. The rankings reveal that the top-ranked player's newest achievement is defeating Eliza. When they ask for the username, the answer comes back as Kaiser. Back in the cave, the hero takes the glowing red fragment into his hand. He realizes the fragment is offering him a class quest called Succession of Fate. The goblin excitedly congratulates him, convinced this means he is finally becoming a real adventurer. Instead of celebrating, he sits down to think through the danger of what he has just triggered. The goblin asks why he looks so grim when this should be a breakthrough. He admits he has a bad feeling and tells the goblin to check the quest rewards and conditions more carefully. The reward turns out to be Casillar's relic, an item valuable enough to make the goblin ecstatic. The goblin sees only the prize and imagines his master finally joining the ranks of players with relics. He snaps back that the failure penalty is catastrophic. If he fails, the class quest disappears and his class is revoked entirely. He realizes that losing the class would erase everything he has built so far. That thought makes him stop and consider a different consequence. He asks what will happen to the goblin if he becomes jobless and loses his path. The goblin explodes at the implication, taking the question as an insult to his loyalty. In trying to deny any thought of betrayal, the goblin blurts out exactly how ugly the situation would be if his master lost everything. Annoyed but newly resolved, the hero decides to accept the quest partly out of spite, while the goblin's loyalty inches upward. Reading the description, he learns the trial is meant to prove whether he is worthy to inherit Casillar's will. He reassures himself that if he once hunted the iron-blooded demonic dragon, he can probably survive this too. He commits to the challenge and accepts the quest. The trial of fate begins, and he boldly promises to crush whatever monster appears. He recalls that all of this started right after he drew Casillar's card as a hidden piece. In that earlier memory, a priest recoils in horror at the suggestion that he might be Casillar's apostle. He casually confirms the accusation instead of denying it. He even tries to bargain for a blessing by claiming he will save the village if the church helps him. The priest reacts with disgust, denounces Casillar's apostle as defiling sacred ground, and cancels the request on the spot. When the hero demands his reward anyway, the priest refuses and throws him out. Looking back, he notes that priests always lost their minds whenever Casillar's name came up. In the present, he absent-mindedly eats while reviewing the class information again. He studies the class description more carefully, trying to understand what kind of inheritance he is really dealing with. The text reveals Cassiar as the battle god, master of Avtartal, and a being so formidable that even the gods feared him. From that, the hero concludes that priests probably treated Cassiar like a devil rather than a god. Back in the trial, he realizes his earlier assumptions were badly wrong just as something massive crashes into the cavern. He is startled by the sudden attack and curses at the shock. Weapons begin raining from above, turning the battlefield itself into a threat. The goblin senses the real event is only now starting and warns him to pay attention. A system message reveals the truth. Battle god Cassiar is awakening from his seal, and the objective is merely to survive 5 minutes. The summoned figure starts materializing beneath a vast magic circle. Cassiar fully appears, and the system confirms that the class quest has officially begun. The hero is stunned that the enemy is not some monster but Cassiar himself, and that survival alone is the condition. Even so, he decides the details no longer matter and prepares to fight. He summons his weapon and tells himself he only has to stay alive for 5 minutes. That narrow condition tempts him into thinking the challenge might still be manageable. Cassiar opens one eye, and the mood of the cavern changes instantly. The hero feels the danger before the attack even comes. An overwhelming pressure locks his body in place, as if invisible chains are binding him from head to toe. Cassiar takes a single step, and that alone feels like a death sentence approaching. The goblin screams for his master to fight as Cassiar closes the distance. But the hero can barely respond, frozen under the pressure. He cannot understand why his body is failing him at the worst possible moment. What frightens him most is that even his hero trait refuses to activate. The system explains that the trait has been disabled outright, not by any removable status effect. He realizes Cassiar's presence alone is crushing him without using ordinary skills or debuffs. Seeing him unravel, the goblin tries to save Liza and assumes his master has already lost his mind. Humiliated by his own fear, the hero forces himself to confront it instead of surrendering to it. He roars back at the terror, refusing to be broken by it. That defiance finally makes Cassiar look at him directly. The hero steadies himself and brings his sword around, regaining enough control to act. He reminds himself of everything he suffered to reach this point, and refuses to be cowed now. The goblin immediately undercuts the speech by pointing out that his legs are visibly shaking. He angrily insists that trembling is beside the point, and orders the goblin to treat this as the dramatic part. Then he addresses Cassiar directly, acknowledging that the god's skills have already helped him greatly. He follows that with a complaint that the failure penalty for succession of fate is absurdly harsh. He keeps ranting that it makes no sense to lose everything over a single failed quest. Cassiar listens in blank silence while the hero keeps venting about the unfairness of the system. The hero's frustration spills over into a full breakdown about how hard he worked for his items and progress. The goblin quietly concludes that his master has finally snapped. The hero laments that just when he finally gained good skills and equipment, his luck turned against him again. The goblin begs him to stop talking to himself and actually fight. Instead, the hero calmly tells the goblin to stay still because only 1 minute remains. The goblin suddenly realizes all that babbling was deliberate stalling and praises his master's shameless cunning. Encouraged, the goblin urges him to keep talking and buy the last bit of time. But the hero abruptly lunges forward instead, abandoning the stalling plan. He decides this is his chance to use back grab while Cassiar is off guard. He even convinces himself that defeating Cassiar might unlock a hidden reward beyond mere survival. The system activates back grab as he commits to the surprise attack. Cassiar notices anyway and smiles, amused rather than threatened. The attack fails completely as Cassiar catches him by the throat with one hand. The hero is horrified that even his trump card did nothing. Cassiar slams him into the ground with brutal force. The goblin can only scream as his master is crushed. Pinned and bleeding, the hero is left helpless beneath Cassiar's grip. Cassiar remains over him, breathing steadily, while the goblin watches in dread. The goblin calls out desperately, fearing the worst. The hero curses his terrible luck and wonders if this is really where he loses everything. Cassiar answers that despair with a strange, almost playful laugh. Instead of finishing him immediately, Cassiar reaches down as if examining him. The hero braces for another attack, still unable to understand Cassiar's intent. Then Cassiar starts touching and prodding him in a way that makes no sense in the middle of battle. The hero panics as Cassiar keeps handling him like a curious toy. To his disbelief, Cassiar starts tickling him, turning the life or death clash into absurd humiliation. Cassiar's smile makes it clear he is enjoying the reaction. The hero recoils and demands to know what Cassiar is trying to do with that bizarre gesture. The goblin suddenly realizes Cassiar has acknowledged his master. He explains that when Cassiar sticks out his tongue, it means he recognizes the other person. Cassiar's expression brightens at that interpretation, as if pleased to be understood. He continues smiling, no longer acting like an executioner. The goblin translates that Cassiar is asking whether this human is the one who will inherit his will. Caught off guard, the hero hurriedly answers yes. The goblin relays Cassiar's judgment. This is the first human who did not submit but charged forward, and that stubborn will is enough to pass. The hero complains that a god this powerful should really communicate more clearly, then asks how the goblin can understand any of this. The system ends the trial, awards him the first fragment of fate, and reveals that he has entered the successor route instead of the ordinary apostle route. The goblin adds that Cassiar now intends to hand over his relic. Cassiar reaches into his own sash to retrieve the promised item. The hero is alarmed by where the relic seems to be coming from. Cassiar calmly continues pulling it free while the hero protests in horror. A glowing rod-like relic emerges from Cassiar's waist wrapping. The hero desperately tries to reassure himself that the situation is not as indecent as it looks. Cassiar presents the relic without any embarrassment at all. The hero can only call him insane for delivering a divine treasure like this. Cassiar pauses, seemingly confused by the complaint. The hero points in disbelief and demands to know why the item had to come out from there. The system identifies the reward as the relic of Cassiar, the martial god, named Chanbayan, and the hero admits the god's relic feels deeply unsettling. Cassiar gives a casual farewell gesture, as if the exchange were perfectly normal. The goblin warns that time is up and they need to leave immediately. A teleportation circle flares beneath them before the hero can ask what is happening. The sudden transfer catches both him and the goblin completely off guard. They are yanked away through the portal while the goblin begs his master to save him from the ride. They arrive in a ruined but grand cityscape under open sky. The landing is rough, and both of them are thrown hard onto the stone. Dizzy and nauseated, they receive confirmation that they have entered Bryan, the second city of the main continent. Recovering, the hero recognizes the city as Bryan and notes that at least the teleport did not dump them somewhere worse. While also sensing that some larger event is happening today, he notices an unfamiliar old man nearby and asks who he is. The old man approaches and says that although it is earlier than the prophesied day, this meeting too must be fate. The goblin immediately warns that the old man's aura is far from ordinary. The hero tests the warning by drawing his sword and preparing for trouble. Instead of attacking, the old man drops into a deep bow. He declares that he has long awaited the successor who would inherit that person's will. Introducing himself as Gamillion Adrian of the royal-serving Adrian family, he reveals himself as a hidden NPC who has been waiting for this exact moment. The goblin is impressed by the old man's importance, while the hero, still traumatized by recent events, reacts with open suspicion. The system records the encounter and starts a new job quest, One Step Toward the Truth, which promises access to the main quest category if completed. The hero is stunned because a main quest was supposed not to exist at all. He recalls that even after 1 billion players and more than a year of play, not even the famed king of adventurers could find any main quest and concluded there was none. Now that impossible path has appeared before him, and Gamillion says that since he has already met Lord Cassiar, there is something every successor must hear. Realizing the importance of the moment, the hero asks him to continue. Gamillion begins unveiling the erased history of humanity, saying that 1,456 years ago humans were fundamentally different, blessed with extraordinary potential and powerful enough to hold one of the world's 5 great thrones. Just as the new rulers were settling onto the throne, another force invaded their world. The invaders were the beings now worshipped as gods, hateful rulers who commanded the otherworlders. That revelation shocks the listeners as they realize the gods were behind everything from the beginning. The young man forces silence so the explanation can continue without interruption. The elder explains that after Ragnarok destroyed the divine realms, the gods fled here, tried to seize Abtartal, and triggered a long war to claim it. That war devastated a third of Abtartal, and only one human managed to reverse humanity's collapse. That savior was Cassiar, the martial god, a human powerful enough to stand against the gods. When Cassiar began defeating even myth-grade gods, humanity believed victory was finally within reach, until something far worse emerged from below. The hatred and grudges of the dead fused into a new race of darkness known as the Abyss. As gods and humans alike fell into the Abyss and returned as monsters, the world neared total ruin. Faced with extinction, the gods and humanity stopped fighting and made a desperate bargain that demanded all of humanity be sacrificed. The price of peace was faith itself, with all humans handed over to the rulers as offerings to sustain the gods' power. Humanity was stripped of its former potential and reduced to weak servants under divine rule, while Cassiar was sealed away at once. The elder adds that the gods also exploited otherworlders, throwing them into the abyss when they arrived, destroying their original bodies and remaking them as apostle puppets. Hearing that, the young man begins connecting this history to his own situation. His small companion snaps at him to stay quiet because it is still trying to concentrate. The young man realizes this chain of events may be the true origin of everything happening now. His companion, already strained, finally blurts out its frustration at his constant interruptions.